Hello, everyone, and welcome to another small screen Star Wars. As always, I am Julian Mush. I am joined by Rachel Wilkinson, or should I say Rachel, new last name?
Rachel already forgot my new last
No,
name.
I don't know. I just didn't want to. I just wanted to say it.
Wenstob.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see. I am gonna change it. I changed it on my social media.
Oh, you've decided you're going to change it now?
So I don't have any connection. Not that I don't have a connection, but I don't really care about my last name. But I feel like for podcast sakes, we can leave me.
Sure, because I can change it right now.
It's gonna confuse our fans. Our
you're right.
Huge amount of fans.
We don't want to confuse our fans.
I don't want people to not know who I am. So
no, it's like, who is this new person? Yeah, well.
Same W,
Yeah, just Rachel. I just change this to Rachel W, and then that way it can be anything.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, freshly married, so that's fun.
Yeah.
And as you said earlier to my girlfriend, exactly the same. Everything's exactly the same.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Like, how's married life? I'm like, the same. It's just slightly less stressful now that the
Is
wedding's
it? Just
over.
not that wedding's over.
Oh,
And you can
that was the most stressful time ever.
So is having a wedding fun because you get to have the wedding,
obviously
but
it's super
bad
fun.
because the planning is.
It's the planning, and it's because we threw a wedding in a backyard for 150 people, so I had to create a venue and create everything out of thin air. So it's just a lot.
Yeah, but it came together pretty good, I think.
Thank you.
I had a great time.
I'm good. I'm glad.
Although my Sunday was a complete write-off. I was.
That's what I want to hear.
Yeah, it was just a mess. Kara helped her family put together a gazebo.
Yeah, and you.
I don't know how she did it. I literally lay down in the grass and fell asleep. I couldn't do it. And then I just this is taking way too long. I spent all day just sleeping, basically.
That's hilarious. I got some good video of you doing the Arrested Development chicken.
Oh yeah, the chicken dance.
It's good.
Holy shit, that always makes me laugh. So yeah, I'm
really
good.
good.
I'm glad that's been documented.
I'm glad people had fun. It was good. I have 4 kilos of cheese curds left over, so.
And not that many beers, unfortunately, but that's okay. We got these ones, so we'll just crack that right now.
These aren't from my brewery, but it's fine.
Okay, I didn't. No one can really see.
I know.
Well, it's really good, actually.
Right? Shouting out the Dead Frog Sour Pack. It's really good.
Mm-hmm.
If you see
Wow,
it
I was
out
not. Mine is blueberry lemonade.
Ooh.
Speaking of drinking beers on a podcast, you know that at one point, you probably don't know this. Okay. This is new information, but at one point, many moons ago,
okay.
I had bought a URL because I was like, I'm going to start another new show. And I was going to call it Batman and Beer. And I was able to buy batmanandbeer.com.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to do every episode we would do a new Batman thing, maybe an episode of the animated series or a comic or whatever. There's unlimited stuff Batman
there's so
related.
much Batman. Yeah.
And then do maybe not a new beer every time, but have a different beer with every
review?
a pairing of the beer with the
content somehow.
Yeah.
I like that.
Anyway, I never got around to doing that, and then I ended up releasing that. So if anyone wants to buy batmanandbeer.com, you're welcome to.
Well, there we go.
I also don't even know, obviously the name Batman, I don't know what the legal... I'm using... Star Wars isn't our name. I don't know where that falls either, if we're allowed to even use that.
We haven't been sued yet, so...
Nor do I plan to be.
No.
I don't plan to be sued, so... Listen, if anyone listening works at Lucasfilm in the legal department, just let's just keep this between you and I.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So the plan today, we're going to talk about the Acolyte season finale, season 1, episode 8, titled "The Acolyte." Just the worst name. I know. I'm sorry, but if you have to just name, if the name of the episode is the name of the show, you failed in some way, because then you've
maybe they're it's full circle.
Is it though? It's not. I don't think it is, because I think the title of the series has a certain meaning, and the episode should have a certain meaning, and they can be the same, but the hope would be that what you're trying to say at the episode level, you can be a little bit more nuanced than you can be at the title of the entire series level. Right? Mm-hmm. But alas,
what would you have
earwax
instead?
Oh, I don't know. Well, the problem is, here's the problem, right? We've got, from an episode perspective, I guess we have dueling titles for some, but not all episodes, right? And then almost all of them connect together. So we have episode 1, Lost/Found. We talked about that, right? Sisters are lost, then found.
Yeah.
And then we have Revenge Justice. That's May and Osha's perspective on the past.
Right.
And then Destiny and Choice, right? Season 1, Episode 3, the first flashback, and Season 1, Episode 7.
Yeah.
The second flashback being, as you expecting it would be Destiny and
I thought it was going to be Fate.
Fate.
But
But
I guess
again,
that's
we
the
talked
same
about that.
thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
So those two match up, and then you have Day and Night, obviously.
Yeah.
Right? Searching for Chimera and May, and then they find them, and it turns to night, and then they all die. So you have let's see here. Basically, they painted themselves into a corner by not having. They could have done this. They could have either done another dueling title here, another
right.
something / something, right? Because episode 6, Teach/Corrupt, right?
Yeah.
Great title. But they chose to use a singular title for the final that doesn't have anything to bounce off of because the other ones have been used
and it's also
already.
not one word.
Yeah.
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 I get it.
It's to me, and then the thing is, when I first turned on the episode last night, it just said episode 8. There was no title for it at all. Yeah.
Oh, weird.
I assume maybe there's some sort of like timed element there.
Maybe.
But either way, to me, it's lazy. It's like I hate to use that because I feel like everything it's hard to do anything.
It's like too on the nose.
It's just not. It's literally the name of the series. We already know that.
Yeah.
I don't. And I guess you could say, okay, if you want to really like dive into it, the Acolyte as a title is used here because at the end of this episode, Osha decides to take on that role as the Acolyte, and Chimera gets what he wants. He wants an Acolyte, as he said specifically.
Yeah.
Right? So I guess, but like I feel like that's. Is there anything else? Is there any other, or May decides to not become the Acolyte? There's a couple of those like.
Well, it's like we don't know who the Acolyte is, right? So it's at the start of the episode you see it's called the Acolyte. And you're like, all right, like which one?
But then maybe it's Chimera.
Chimera could be either
because
of them.
We see Plagueis also.
Yeah.
Spoilers, obviously. The spoilers are already
pretty cool. Some people are mad about it.
Why?
I don't know.
Why is everyone mad about
everything?
Okay, we can't. We did our What did we call it? Like we got the hate off of our chest at the beginning of the season. So I just we should need to avoid giving these people power.
Yeah.
In any form or capacity.
I was laughing because I was just scrolling Twitter or whatever, X as you call
what
it.
What an absolute.
But I just saw a lot of people
hellscape.
be like, "It's lore breaking," and then people be like, "Why?" And then they'd be like, "If you have to ask them, like, I'm not gonna tell you."
Oh yeah,
because
classic.
You don't know, man.
Well, and listen, but
spitting stuff.
People were always like, "It's lore breaking." I was like, "This show's not over yet,"
Yeah.
and then it turns out at the end, it breaks no lore.
None. Yeah, but they're like,
So-
"Oh, Play just being there is lore breaking." It's like, is it?
It's not. It's not.
It's
though.
really not. It's.
He has. I'm looking at his
funny.
his Wikipedia entry here. There's no
Someone was trying to
birthday.
Someone was trying to say that he should be a kid at this point in time. It's like, should he? Do we even know like anything about when he's born? How long?
Well, how long do Muns
We probably
live? Or
don't know.
Munes? Are they Muns or
Mun.
Munes? Mun? But the two U's. I guess I don't know. Moons.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Mun.
Anyway, if anyone knows, that'd be great. By the way, we do record this live.
Yes, sir.
This is technically a Wednesday. We've been recording every Wednesday. I think we missed one Wednesday.
I think we had to do
Does
a
that sound
late
right?
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Either way, I would say when we normally do them live, but since this is the last episode, we won't be doing another live episode until I'm not sure yet. It depends on when the next series is. I
Yeah.
think the next thing is what
Skeleton Crew?
Skeleton
Yeah,
Crew.
yeah.
So and I don't know if we have a release date for that. I think it's fall.
Sounds about
Or
right.
something like that. Either way, we'll take a short break.
Mm-hmm.
If we do another intermediary episode, sometimes we'd like to come in and like do a fun little one-off episode.
Mm-hmm.
We'll post it on Twitter ahead of time
Yeah.
or Facebook ahead of time, and give you some opportunity to join us live. Otherwise, it's just a crapshoot because it could be any day. Your best bet is to follow us on YouTube and Twitch because when we do go live, you'll get notification that we've done so. Just like Panda Express 024 did.
In the chat.
Longtime friend of the show in the chat saying hello. Hello, Panda Express. Good to have you. Again, always more fun when people are in the chat and we can have bounce some ideas around about the good, the bad, the ugly of these shows. Okay, so again, that's the plan. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin here. I mentioned we're going to take a short break from small screen Star Wars as we typically do after these series wrap up. It is summertime, which means that it's nice to enjoy a little bit of the weather.
Yeah.
Also, got to look for work. Still looking for work. That takes time.
Yeah.
We're
gonna really boost this podcast on our off time.
Listen, here's what's gonna happen. If I can line up a job and it's like, okay, I've got like 3 weeks or 4 weeks until I have to start.
Yeah.
I will just have all sorts of time. I won't have to stress about looking for work, so I'll have just time to just putt around, poke around on tuning things up podcast-wise.
Yeah.
So, but there's no guarantees when that'll happen. So, no promises on that front. That being said, I will say we do typically always take a break anyway after these long series or when we have the opportunity to, so we'll definitely take an opportunity to do that. There will be another regular Tower of Babel podcast episode relatively soon. I'll get back with Jeremy. We'll do an episode. Obviously, we have Wolverine and Deadpool coming out next week.
I really want to see that.
Everyone wants to see it. There's hard to get tickets.
Really?
Yeah, which you don't see very often. But hey, good for the movies. Yeah, the movie theaters.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. That's like I would actually get a grandma to come babysit for me to go see that one.
Right, exactly. So I recommend a matinee.
A matinee, okay.
Yeah,
that's easier for me to actually to swing.
Less people, easier, better seats, that kind of thing. Less chance that someone's going to be a dick and ruin the whole experience. Although, I don't know. So online, people always complain about the movie theaters dying because no one wants to go and have people talking. And
who's talking in the movie theaters?
Yeah, I don't really experience that very often. I don't know if it's a Canadian thing, but like
or an American
generally
thing,
speaking, it's like a Canadian thing for us to get like when we go to the movies, people are pretty good.
Yeah.
Personally. Yeah. All right.
You're right. I feel like I did go to a movie in the States one time and there was a lot of talking. It was in Detroit. But I don't know. Maybe it's just a thing. Just like to chit-chat a little more.
It does happen. I'm not going to deny that it certainly does happen. But relatively speaking, people will tell people to shut up and people will do that. Yeah. In the States, you never know. Someone could just pull a gun and shoot you.
I'm not telling anybody to do anything down there.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, that's all to say that there will be another regular Tower Babel podcast episode relatively soon. I'll try to get that back on a semi-regular schedule as well. And then, again, stay tuned for updates on small screen Star Wars. So that's the main stuff. If you want to help support the show, patreon.com/TowerBabelcast. That's the best place to do that. We last month did Conspiracy Theory, as I mentioned last week. Not the best movie. That being said, this month we're doing Twister, and obviously in anticipation of Twisters, which is I think out this week in theaters. So that is exclusive to the patrons. That's just $5 a month. You also get access to our Discord, which allows you to get to the behind-the-scenes recording studio channel on the Discord, so you can actually listen to the podcast as it's being recorded live in a less video-based format.
Yes.
What to say?
Less video-based.
Yeah. There's also maybe some behind-the-scenes before and after stuff. There's usually not that much, but it's always an option. So would encourage anyone who is already part of our Patreons to head over to that when we go live, and then you can actually get a little bit of a different experience, a little bit more intimate experience over there.
Yeah.
As well as obviously we have all sorts of other chit-chats going on a semi-regular basis in the Discord. Okay. Let's get into the overall review here. We talked a little bit about, I think, some of the, nitpicks that aren't really problems, right?
Yeah.
There's no real lore breaks. I think that's been proven now. That's great. No. That being said, this episode clearly sets up a season 2.
Yeah.
That we don't know is going to come.
Mm-hmm.
So the first question is, do you think we'll get a season 2?
Man, I don't know. Like, it's hard because I feel like for the most part, Lucasfilms is probably going to ignore,
most of the haters.
I think so, because it's just it would. There was too much hatefulness before it even came out. For
right.
So
how do you
seriously?
How do you separate it from like the serious criticisms from the non-serious ones?
And
which is again what we talked about early in the season.
I do think enough people are liking it that
the numbers are apparently good.
Yeah. Okay, so there you go.
So,
and I feel like
decent.
Like I said, there was a one time that I was mentioning that when they dropped the Black Series version of the helmet and it sold out immediately. So
yes,
it's like
you can't get it to like 2025 or 2026.
So I'm like, man, okay, so like people obviously aren't like that mad about it. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to know whether we're gonna get another, if it's
Is
Acolyte or if it's something else.
is there enough here that if this was the last that we saw of the Acolyte that you would feel satisfied?
Um, I mean, yes and no. I'm quite curious about a few things. Like, it doesn't leave.
Like what happens to May and Osha?
Well, yeah, right. And
Yeah,
like just
right.
the whole dynamic has changed now, right? And I would kind of like to know what Yoda knows, what he doesn't know,
Right.
and then the Plagueis connection.
What did he know and when did he know it? Right.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to, the lore breaking stuff.
Right, and
right?
there's also backstory there with Vernestra and Chimere too, so that I'm curious about. So, I mean, it's sometimes with these things we can get the content in comics instead if they don't feel.
Yes, that's what they did with the unfinished, books and comics, right? With unfinished Star Wars, Clone Wars.
Yeah, there's
arcs.
some Maul stuff
Yes.
that got finished in that mediums.
He like breaks someone out of jail or
They
something
break
in that.
him out of jail. Like,
Oh, they
yeah,
break him out of jail,
yeah.
right? Okay. Right.
So yeah, I mean, if all else fails, I'm sure somebody would pick it up, at least in that medium. But I do think there's enough like interesting content that we could get at least another run of another show, not necessarily Acolyte continued, but
Right.
I like the Sith stuff, and I like that this was a darker story.
It. I was listening to another show, not to like steal their content,
Yeah.
but I think they made a good point, which was that this show had a great premise, but I don't think that they like fully brought that premise to the screen.
I think
They didn't
yeah.
fulfill the promise of this is a darker story with a Sith as the main character.
Yeah.
Not really.
I
Kind of just touched on.
I don't know why we couldn't have gotten maybe a couple more episodes.
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing
Like
I wrote here.
10 episodes would have been kind of like a nice, neat little package.
Enough of these 8 episode
Yeah,
series.
right?
It's
It's
stupid.
not
It's
enough.
not long enough,
No.
and especially for doing 34
Yeah.
40-minute
yeah.
episodes.
Agreed.
This even the finale comes in at what, 43 minutes or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not long enough. It leaves too many threads dangling. It does not give enough time to do enough character work. I think it's maybe it's not fair, right? We compare things to Andor, and I compare things to Game of Thrones a lot,
Well-
and obviously House of the Dragon. House of the Dragon right now, season 2, absolutely crushing it.
Yeah.
We talk about this all the time. What they are able to do with, and their episodes 65 minutes. Like they
Wow.
are not shortening anything.
It's a movie.
And not a very short
It's
movie.
a movie from, the 90s or 80s.
Not 90-minute movie is like
Yeah, it's
the
true.
perfect number. But like and speaking of 90-minute movies don't really have enough time to do a lot of this stuff either, which is why movies did get longer, because you want to spend more time with characters. You need, and
Right.
so not this last episode and not this last Sunday, but the Sunday before, House of the Dragon had this big epic dragon battle. It's very exciting, big moments, action. The fallout of that, is left dangling. We pick it up the next week, and it's all just them trying to grapple with what happened, the fallout of it, all that stuff. And it's fascinating. It's almost more fascinating than what happened with the big dragon battle.
Interesting.
Right? So it would be really cool to have a moment like some of the stuff that we have happen in this episode, where people learn these big revelations, like Soul lied to you your entire life,
Yeah.
right? But instead of like a 2-minute long scene that culminates in Saul's death, we could have something much more like a little bit more in depth, I would say.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I think the show definitely could have used a couple more episodes. It just really would have rounded things out. It would have made it feel less clunky with those flashbacks too. It's
I do feel a little vindicated because, again, I did hear around the internet a little bit of the echoing of what I had mentioned earlier about how the show never really achieved its promise of the Rashomon thing, right?
Mhm.
And I talked about The Last Night, which is that great movie that I love, that really does explore and show you how someone's, personal perspective on something can really color their perception,
absolutely.
right? and we just it's like the second flashback is like whose even perspective is it? Is it the Jedi's perspective? But we get scenes without the Jedi.
Yeah.
So it creates this mushy middle ground. And then so this is the other thing that I think is entirely accurate, and again, something that I've seen echoed a few times, often on the other side, but this is an interesting thing, which is that Lucasfilm is gun shy. They are afraid to do interesting things ever since The Last Jedi. They so many people got so butthurt around that, and guess what? The butt hurting has never stopped, and it's so annoying.
Yeah.
It's like just have the strength, the what's the strength of your own convictions, right?
Yeah.
To follow through with, hey, we have this vision. You had a creator come to you. Leslie Headland says, here's what I want to do. I want to tell a story from the Sith perspective. The Sith is going to be the main character. We're going to tell it's going to be dark tone. It's going to really show the Jedi in a different light.
Yeah.
And we're not going to pull our punches, and we're going to do Rashomon, so we're going to show from all these different perspectives so you really get an understanding. But no, they did pull their punches.
Yeah.
They said, no, we can't really have the Sith be the main character. They even at one point, Leslie Headland had to rewrite a few of the episodes to add more Chimere in because they really liked his screen test. They thought he had really good chemistry with May and Osha.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so we're going to write more of that in, and that was arguably the best stuff.
Yeah.
So if that wasn't going to be in there, what we would have ended up with would have been an even more diluted vision of what I think Leslie Headland originally had in mind.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a shame because you can see the bones of what should be something way more interesting on screen. There's elements, little pieces, glimpses of it every once in a while. You're like, wow, that's really cool. Would love to explore that more. But then we just don't have time. We have to blow right past it.
Yeah.
As Panda Express mentions here, the Senate plot is interesting. I wish they introduced
Yeah.
the Senate earlier to build tension, explain why the Jedi were moving around secretly. They barely touch on it because, we don't have time?
Mm-hmm.
Add on another 5 minutes to an episode, and we could have a whole subplot that drives tension through the entire season about how the Jedi are trying to solve this murder mystery before the Senate catches on.
Yeah.
So that they can keep it secret. But instead, we get introduced. We get a name drop of the senator from this episode in episode 2 or whatever it is.
Right.
Right. It doesn't appear until the finale, and it just feels like a completely limp noodle of a story thread because there's no, we don't care about these people.
Yeah.
It's
They looked very Hunger Games.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
The Senate. Yeah, but I think actually that's funny. I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
But I think it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that they'd be. Yeah, I mean it makes sense. Yeah, because they'd be all from different places.
They're all from different planets, and they're all high society. It reminds me of a little bit of Andor. Remember when we saw the how people were dressing?
Yeah.
When they were doing the Senate stuff with
Mon Mothma.
Mon Mothma. So, but like this is like years before. Everything's great, right? So everyone is just partying all the time, presumably.
Yeah. Cocktail
if you're in the
parties.
Senate.
And,
Yeah, exactly.
Brunches.
Interviews by the pool.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this this episode or the season as a whole here?
I mean, no. I think we can we'll get to it as we go through it, right? So, as we go through the recap.
How do you feel like the season comes together? Do you think this? I mean, I personally don't think it ties a bow on enough things.
No, but I did appreciate that we picked up right where episode 6 left off. I like that because I was like, okay, sweet, we're getting right back to where we were. So
yeah, if only we didn't have to just cut it. If we didn't have to spend a whole week
on
this thing that felt ultimately super redundant.
Yeah, it's yeah, I just feel like there are still a lot of holes, and it's not holes like not
the middle of the
holes,
season.
but
It was just so much stronger than the beginning and the end of the season.
Yeah,
yeah. The first 2 episodes aren't great. The last 2 episodes aren't great. Everything else, pretty good. That's kind of how I feel
there
about
are
it.
other moments, right? There's cool action sequences, and those are always very good. I've found in this show. Yeah, I just it's hard when we don't know if we're gonna get anything else. So it's hard for me to have a story that doesn't feel finished.
I don't think that they
tease
Yoda and all that stuff without
That's what I mean.
without
Like,
being willing to give
what?
us more.
Yeah, it's odd. The choice is odd.
Right. And again, it would be nice to see Lucasfilm learn a little bit from some of their mistakes here,
Yeah.
right? Again, this 8-episode thing, it's just not working.
Yeah, you gotta pick it up a little bit more. Give us
It's
a
either
little extra.
either just do a movie. It's like this is like just trim it down, give us a 2.5-hour movie,
Yeah.
right? That just tells the story succinctly, or commit to the concept and give us a full 10 episode season, or 10 or 12 episode season.
Yeah.
Right? How many episodes did the Andor have? 10 or 12?
I can't remember.
But
Yeah.
each episode was long.
Mhm.
They understood how a TV show works. It had multiple season arcs, all of them tied together in the end to for a satisfying conclusion. We just don't. I don't think Lucasfilm knows how to make a really good TV show, because the only reason that the Andor ended up as good as it was because they had so much leeway to just do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
Right? And everything that has, and then this isn't to, like, cast aspersions on Dave Filoni, but everything under his purview, and Andor technically was, so it's like, why not give him credit there? Credit for not getting his hands too involved, I would say.
Yeah.
But I think at this point it's clear they need to change the strategy of how, if they want to do TV shows, commit to the TV show concept, or just go back to making movies and stop being afraid of offending people who desperately want to be offended.
Yeah.
So just commit to the vision. If you believe in these ideas, follow through.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I have to say on that. Okay, let's get into the recap. So this is, again, Season 1, Episode 8, titled The Acolyte. We talked about why it was probably named that already. This is the logline on IMDb. Confrontation and revelation await. Technically true. We got confrontation, and there was some reveals, although not really.
Yeah.
Written by Jason McAuliffe and Leslie Headland, directed by Henel Culpepper. Also did Episode 6, Teach and Corrupt. So, I think as an individual episode, like, if you completely separated this from everything else, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. If you just took 6 and ran it right into this one,
not bad.
6 and ran
Yeah,
into this, it'd be
6
great.
and ran into 8,
yeah, it would flow really nice.
I think, like, from a directorial perspective, I think really good. There is some clunkiness at the end of the episode that is required to set up kind of what's coming next.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that anyone can do to make that not feel clunky at this point. So it is what it is. Okay, we start with a recap of the entire season, and I think the recap is a mess. It's all over the place. It's completely disorganized. It's like jumping through the timeline of the series of the episode in all sorts of weird ways.
I skipped it, so.
And it's anyway. I mean, if you've watched the whole thing, you don't really need it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it really helps much, because it doesn't. It tries to set up this, like, elaborate, or show this elaborate, cover up that Saul was engaged in,
Right.
or the Jedi were engaged in. But it doesn't do a very good job of, I think, showing that, because I think the season does a bad job of showing it. Anyway, we start with Osha's breathing over the Lucasfilm treatment, which is really cool, I think. And again, takes us right back to where we left off in Episode 6. We're on the unknown planet. Kymir watches with a grin on his face as Osha wears the helmet. But all of a sudden, we hear a Force whoosh sound, and that's typically what they say in the subtitles, is whoosh.
Whoosh, yeah.
And then Osha starts struggling, and Kymir's eyes turn black, and this is in the same way that Torben's did when his mind was invaded by Mother Anastasia. Kymir yells no, and we get this his perspective, as he's also put into that same, like, mind space as Torben, with, like, the blue color grading. But he fights and is able to fight the mind probe or whatever, and work to take off the helmet. With the helmet off, the two look at each other. They're both quite shaken. But I guess the question is, what the fuck happened here? What's going on?
Okay, so to me, like, her putting on that, like, sensory deprivation helmet kind of, like, brought out that force in her, right? Kind of unknowingly. The same, because her mom can do that, right? Like,
Right.
The mind control. So it took over him, but I don't think she was like able to control it. I think she was kind of like overtaken by it and like by the dark side a little bit. So he's struggling, being like, shit, like I got to get this helmet off of her so she can snap out of it, right? That's kind of like what
Okay,
caught
so
from it.
that's
Did you
I
not
think
see what her eyes looked like when the helmet came off her too?
they'd had the little bit of the glowing.
It's the same as the end of the episode. So it's a red lightsaber reflected in her eyes because she says she's seeing May
that's
hold
really
the red lightsaber.
cool.
Yeah, so
okay,
you can
no.
see.
So I did see something. I wasn't sure what I was
Yeah,
seeing.
you can see like this, like at least that's what I thought it was. You can see like this streak of red across both of her eyes, and it's a red lightsaber because that's what
so
she's
it's
seeing.
her vision.
Yeah.
Of so, I think that's an entirely valid like reading of what happened. I think there is an alternate reading that there was a third party involved that was influencing this whole situation.
Like Plagueis?
I think. I mean, so because they set up the Plagueis thing later, and he's clearly on the island already, although doing what? It's very odd. But
well, I think he's the master. I think he's controlling.
But he's just hanging out.
Yeah.
But does Kymir know?
Yeah.
So he knows.
I think
that he's
Kymir
there.
knows he's there. Yeah.
But how is he recruiting acolytes if he knows his master's watching? It's very weird to me.
I think he's supposed to. Like, I think this is like.
This is all part of the master plan.
Yeah.
C'est possible. But so there's one. I guess there's a flaw in my logic here, which is that, of course, the sensory deprivation helmet's supposed to prevent mind probes or whatever. Right. That being said, the rules on that are loosey-goosey, it seems like. And if maybe you're close enough and you're powerful enough as Plagueis is, then you could potentially still influence this.
Right.
I think you're right in the sense that, what Kymir says to her before she puts the helmet on is, it's just you and the Force and what you take with you.
Yeah.
Right? And so she takes in with her what she said that she couldn't ever suppress in this episode. The hatred she had for her sister and the loss of and the mourning she had for her mother, right? And those two things consumed her and kind of empowered her, but I don't know. I guess it amplified her abilities, and then she was unknowingly invading.
I think so. I think it was just kind of losing control, and like he just needed to get that helmet off of her to kind of like snap that connection.
Why do you think it happened so quickly? That's why the whooshing thing feels surprising to me, because it feels like an external force that like lifted her into that state.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Anyway, we don't get the answer to that. It's just interesting. Those are. I think yours is more likely the reading there.
Yeah.
But
well, she's also seeing the future too, right? So she's like getting this vision. She's kind of like fully immersed now in this like dark side kind of force magic or whatever magics are for the force. So I think just him pulling that helmet off of her was kind of like ending that sensory deprivation and kind of like snapping that connection a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so when she gets the helmet off, she says that she saw May killing someone, right? She had a saber in her hand but didn't use it, right? Kymir gets excited to hear that May still can kill somebody without a weapon and prepares. He's like, great, May's still on board. Let's get out of here. We gotta. I think it's a little impulsive, in my opinion. It feels a little immature to take that perspective. After everything that happened, you're just being like, oh, this thing that you saw must be real. It's the thing that I wanted, so I'm going to believe it to be true.
You saw the future. Like he says something like that to her about.
Right. Yeah.
And she makes that comment about how it can still change, and there's still time.
Well, that's right. The future is not fixed.
Right.
I can still stop her. Right. And so what's interesting, of course, just like we've seen with the Force visions of any kind, especially of the future, right? And as Yoda always cautioned, right, the future always in motion. Always in motion. The future is right. So what's more likely is she saw herself killing Soul, right? And then in an attempt to stop it, just like any prophecy, in an attempt to stop the prophecy, ultimately fulfills it, right?
Absolutely.
So that's fun. I think that's always a nice like Star Wars Force, future vision thing that we've seen play out many times, and I think it's always that like destiny versus choice scenario, right?
Yeah.
But which is why the Jedi always caution against putting too much stock into visions of the future, because if you do what Anakin did,
just
and
never
be like,
works out for them.
it just they know it's a trap, right? It's a trap. Anyway, I think that's a fun twist. Osha reminds Kymer that he doesn't know where she's going, so slows his roll down a bit. So he still needs to find May. Doesn't know where she is. They agree to go together, but quote, they'll see who gets there first, or gets to her first. So it becomes this little like race concept again. A different show, or a show that was willing to give itself a little bit more time, would explore this dynamic, right? This idea of Chimere wanting to exploit this scenario, and Osha looking to prevent it.
Right.
And we get like one scene of that, and that's it.
Yeah.
And it's like 30 seconds, so I think that's also a shame.
Yeah.
Right? Any other thoughts on this opening sequence? I thought it's pretty cool.
No, I liked it. I thought it was very, very interesting. And I don't know, it was nice to kind of see her power too. So I found that, fascinating. But
yeah, well, I mean, as Kymer had said, I mean, she's more powerful than she knows, right? Okay, so we cut to the Jedi ship above Brendok. Sol plans to call Master Venestra and bring the Jedi to Brendok to prove once and for all that there is a Vergence on the planet. And so they have this, Sol and May have this exchange, and to prove what? That murdering our mother was justified. May pushes back. Sol rebuts that what happened was an accident, but May is not satisfied by that. Quote, if it was an accident, then why didn't you tell Osha? Why did you lie to her? Why did you blame it on me?
Yeah.
Right? These are all valid questions, right? Sol reminds her that she started the fire and locked everyone in. So he tries to like judo flip it back on her.
Yeah.
It's a deflection tactic, right? Ultimately, I think what's happening here is Sol is being eaten alive by his guilt, right? It is just consuming him, and he is fighting. He's having these like internal battles around what the right thing to do is, and he's not yet ready to admit that the mistake that he made was A, entirely his fault, and B, not justified, and C, mostly the first A and B.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And that he's just not ready to take full ownership of it yet. So he continues to kind of push back. So May reminds him that everyone's death was the Jedi's fault, right? Again, the perspective here, again, a different show might have done this a little differently by having truly shown us this different perspective, where you could really make the argument that Mother Coral was really the instigator here,
Right.
and that if she hadn't instigated violence, that no violence would have came to be at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And they would have just talked this out. Mother Anastasia certainly was interested in violence. And that, but you could just keep, going further back and say, well, if the Jedi had never intervened at all, there would have been no reason for violence, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So it just keeps going back. Well, and if Mother Anastasia had never made the twins in the first place, then the Jedi wouldn't have had to intervene, and then ultimately it's a circular argument, right? I guess where do you fall? We can take a little sidebar here. Where do you fall on the whole Sol is culpable side? Obviously, he does kill Mother Anastasia.
Yeah.
Yes. But again, given the circumstances, I don't think he's entirely unjustified to have done what he did, given what he was seeing around him at that moment.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to that same question about like, are the Jedi right to have this full control over training children and not letting anybody else train kids in their ways, regardless of what they are?
Or have any power to step in and intervene in any scenario.
Yeah, like I think the Jedi were hasty in everything that happened. I feel like if they had taken a step back and try to learn a little bit more about this coven and what they were all about, that probably would have been helpful, as to not just like go in there blazing like Jedi,
lightsabers
ablazing,
yeah.
and being like, you're gonna hurt these kids and we got to get them out of here and all that, right? So, yeah, I feel like it was it's a mix of, it's a fault of everyone. I think
it's a microcosm
yeah.
of a bigger problem, right? The Jedi being,
Yeah.
this again as Senator, what's his name? Senator. Senator, really cool character actor that I really like. Senator Rayencourt says that they're an unchecked, massive unchecked power, right? So, and power corrupts, all that stuff, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
I think there's another too on the nose like reference to what Anakin will do later, in my opinion. But in this specific example of what these 4 Jedi did in this scenario, right? They were given the leeway to make a decision that ultimately cost many lives, right?
Yeah.
And we know that if and the Jedi are essentially framed as space cops in this series,
Yes.
right? We know in real life that when cops take decisions into their own hands and then people die, there needs to be repercussions for that, because if not, there's a massive gap in justice.
Yeah, there's no group that should have absolute power and absolute authority, right?
The judge, jury, and executioner.
Yeah,
right?
like it just doesn't work in any
it's
sense
not
of the
just
term. Yeah,
right. And so by enabling those Jedi to make that decision, it's what causes this problem. That being said, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up.
Yes.
However, it is partly the crime here, because ultimately it's the death of Mother Anastasia and Sol having committed that and then not. And ultimately, I guess it is the cover-up, because he decides not to tell Osha her entire life.
Yeah.
At some point in her young life, he had said, listen,
he should have told her.
When shit was going down, your mother turned into a black mist and looked to try to absorb your sister.
Yeah.
I acted hastily. I wasn't even sure if stabbing mist would work, but it did, and she died.
Yeah.
And I to this day regret that and wish that there was a different outcome. But I didn't premeditate your mother's death.
No.
That was never, you know what I mean? Like, he tries to justify that by saying that they did ultimately, that for Osha's sake, to not send her away as an orphan, that if they weren't fully forthcoming with the events of what happened, and this is always going to, it doesn't fully track for me, because if they brought this story to the High Council and said, here's what all what happened, really crazy, I still want to train Osha. She could be the chosen one or whatever.
Yeah.
And they might have still gone along with it anyway. But instead, they all try to cover it up,
and it just blows up in their faces. Like, it's again, it's that arrogance, right? Like,
what is the lesson is just always tell the truth, I guess. I guess. Anyway, so we're in this middle of this interrogation between Sol and May, and really, this is the last time they really get to speak to each other one-on-one. He says that he felt that they were right to intervene, given what he knew. Right. Listen, I saw this stuff. I felt like, given the powers bestowed upon me by the Jedi, I was justified in stepping in to try to save you and your sister.
Right.
And yes, what happened was ultimately a tragedy, but that's not what I was there to do. Right? He says, my biggest regret was not being able to save you both. Right? Saul continues, adding that May and Osha aren't twins, not even sisters. He tries to provide us with information that Torben had discovered 16 years ago about them being one consciousness in 2 bodies, but is interrupted when May, using Pip, escapes her bonds and shocks him. Because there's nothing, the show is nothing but a series of Saul being interrupted before something happens.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Osha makes a break for it. Pip suggests using the escape ship, not escape pod. This is a full-on ship that they use. She gets in just in time to lock Sol out, saying, quote, See you in hell, Jedi.
Yeah, that was weird.
But not the first time
Yeah,
people have said
that's
that.
true. 'Cause doesn't Han say it?
says
Yeah.
"See you in hell"
Yeah.
in
Right.
in Empire, and says something about hell in A New Hope.
Okay.
So
yeah.
it's
Fair
not the
enough.
first time that someone said hell. So if anyone has any big problems with that, take it up with George Lucas.
Take it up with Han Solo.
Yeah, take it up with Han Solo and George Lucas.
Yeah.
Both of which still alive. So you can reach them if you just know how to contact them. And I'm sure they'll be happy to respond.
Yeah.
Especially
Harrison
Ford, who loves talking about
Star Wars.
Han Solo,
Yeah.
loves it. That being said, it does feel weird to hear it said.
Yeah, it does.
I'm not
going to
lie.
It does feel weird.
It doesn't mean just because it's been done before doesn't make it necessarily right, but it's not lore breaking.
No.
So, See You in Hell, Jedi, though, still pretty epic, I guess, if you're really being honest, right? And accurate given what happens to Soul at the end of this episode.
Pretty accurate. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, she launches the ship, and then she puts on a very rebel pilot styled helmet, and as she leaves, do you feel like obviously we have the rebel insignia, which is like the bird, right?
That's the Phoenix one.
The Phoenix.
That's the Phoenix Squadron. It's different.
Yeah, but it ultimately becomes a version. Like, the rebel insignia ultimately is a version.
Yeah,
of that,
kind
right?
of. Yes. The Rebel Alliance.
Do you feel like it's undercut at all by the fact that this early High Republic Jedi helmet is like almost nearly identical, even to the down to the emblem being? It's technically a version of
it's a version of the High Republic one.
Of the High Republic logo, but
it kind of looks more like it's like the lightsabers with like the bird wings on the side. No, I would say it's not undercut. Like, I'm sure they did it on purpose. Like, it's a little Easter egg, right? Like that. They love doing that in Star Wars. Like,
yes,
I noticed that. I was like, oh, it looks like a Rebel pilot helmet, and like kind of looks like the Rebel Alliance symbol. But yeah,
this is. I mean,
it didn't bug me.
It doesn't bug me too much because we're only 100 years removed.
Yeah.
But I will say, one of the things, and I had asked Pablo Hidalgo about this when we had him on our show many years ago.
Yeah.
That is still on YouTube. You can go to youtube.com/TowerBabbleCast. You can find that interview on our YouTube channel. And I had a nit that I had always picked with Star Wars, especially as related to like the old Republic.
Yeah.
Was that like you're telling me 1,000 years ago shit was exactly the same, essentially?
Yeah.
Essentially,
Yeah.
right? And that just never this just never made sense to me. So, when we introduced, they're like, okay, we're gonna do these kind of like episode 1 stories. We're gonna tell them 100 years or 300 years before the events.
Yeah.
Right. I can buy that those things are much more similar. Right. At 100 years before, most ships didn't have a hyperdrive.
Yeah.
But you're gonna tell me 1,000 years ago, ships definitely still had hyperdrive? Like, doesn't make sense. So, what Pablo had basically said, like that, if and when Lucasfilm was ever going to tackle the Old Republic in an official capacity for live action or animation or whatever, right? That they would probably take a look at like what, from a stylistic perspective, they wanted to keep and not keep from the things that had already been established. And it would likely be more story things and less like a visual interpretation. Because again, everything was the same.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
That makes,
right? So
yeah.
that's just a little sidebar. All right. Anyway, cut to the title card. Soul heads to the cockpit, detaches the ship from the hyperdrive, and pursues May. May heads into a ring around a nearby moon. And by the way, I'm not entirely sure. So the thing about, I shouldn't get into this because it really doesn't matter, but the thing with rings around planets is that they're very rare because they're ultimately temporary. The rings will dissipate over, thousands and millennia.
I didn't know that.
Right? And they require a very specific series of events to take place. For instance, the reason that we have rings around Saturn is because at some point in our galactic history, a large enough rocky body got ripped apart by the gravity of Saturn.
Okay.
And turned into those rings.
Oh, okay.
it's hard to imagine a scenario where a moon would have rings because the larger planet would probably
Pull it.
either pull the rings onto itself or pull the rings down onto the planet entirely.
Fair enough.
It doesn't really matter. It ultimately makes no difference. It just looks really cool.
Yeah.
So, and ultimately, the more planets in sci-fi that have rings, the cooler because rings
it
are
looks
cool as fuck.
cool.
Yeah.
It does.
Imagine if our own planet had rings, it'd be so super dope.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime you see a planet in Star Wars or whatever where a planet has rings, you get to see it from the surface. What a cool visual
Well,
look
doesn't
that
the Earth just have like a ring of like space garbage around it?
Yeah, not
a
really
ring.
to this.
but
Yes, it does, but not to this.
like a
not
net.
in that.
It's
not
just
the
like a
same
bunch
way.
of old dead satellites and
Yeah, there's a bunch
actual
of there is a bunch
satellites.
of space garbage. 100%.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, so May heads into this nearby ring, and hoping that Saul's ship is too big to follow her. She says she wishes that the ship had a hyperdrive. Where do you think she would have run to if she had a hyperdrive? Anywhere? Just away?
I think just away. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
We get some really good looking ship stuff here, though.
Yeah,
in my
it was
opinion.
really
It's very.
cool.
I think it looks great,
It looked
visually
really cool.
speaking.
I like this whole like sequence.
So Saul chases her, ends up just plowing right through those rings.
Yeah.
Right. I kind of wish we got like a wide shot to see the little like trail
the
that they were leaving
trail?
behind.
Yeah, that
That would
would
have been cool.
Yeah,
They
you're
didn't do
right.
that.
Yeah.
Saul appears to be gaining on her, but Basil, who I guess heard what Saul had to say to May, sympathizes with
I
her
don't know.
and disables something on the
I'm
ship,
so confused about this. Like, I don't understand.
but then helps the Jedi later.
Yeah, I don't understand why he helps May. I don't know if he's trying to help Saul to not kill her because he's like, oh, don't like shoot her down. I don't understand. I don't understand the
It's very confusing. We don't speak his language,
motives
so
behind this creature and like what he does and what he doesn't
if anyone can
do.
figure out Basil, let us know.
Yeah.
TowerBabblePodcast@gmail.com.
I was like, what the fuck was that? That was so confusing. I was like, why did he do that?
The script required it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, not really.
The only justification I can think of, I guess you're right. It doesn't because he could have the same thing could have happened. He could have
could have crashed.
gained
just
on her,
anyway.
crashed into her, caused her to
Yeah.
crash down onto the planet, and then he could have just followed her
Yeah.
down.
I don't know. I thought it was odd.
It is odd.
Yeah. That was the one thing. Well, not the one thing, but that was one of the things in this episode. I was like, why? Like, what was the motivation behind that? That was weird. But
Again, my only explanation is that he overheard the whole conversation that we didn't see, which is again
Yeah.
a shame, and decided, oh no, May's totally right. She needs my help.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm gonna go with that as my headcanon.
That works.
Anyway, we get another really cool look as Saul's ship causes the ring crystals or little rocks to like create this like tidal wave
Mhm.
behind
So
May's
cool.
ship, and then like smacks her out of the ring, and then they crash down to the planet. She says, "Brace yourself, Pip," which is like, when did she learn that the droid's name was Pip? I guess maybe they had a conversation off screen. To me, this is weird because she treats Pip in the same way that OSHA treated Pip,
Yeah, I know.
but they have no reason to have that same type of
Not
dynamic.
really. Yeah. Yeah, it's weird.
Anyway, other than the fact that they're the same person,
Yeah.
you could argue. Okay. I guess there you. Okay. New theory. The two of them have been influencing each other the entire time.
Probably. There's
and
probably
just
definitely
didn't know
that
it.
sort of like connection there, I would assume.
And that there may be a little fluid, like
Yeah.
OSHA, as we see her as the acolyte at the end, is really much more that of what May was in the beginning of the season.
Right?
They flip, but maybe it's because they were literally the same person all along,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
They're just the two different sides.
Yeah, and that so she's just, ultimately the problem with this is that we're making all these speculations about this because the show did not provide enough information for us
Yeah.
to be able to come to these conclusions on our own. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
Friend of the show, Jonathan Davis, in the chat. Always happy to have
Yeah.
you here. Okay, so what did you think of the way that they shot this crash as her ship landed on Brendok? I thought it was funny. I'm not sure if it was intentionally funny, but like the music, crescendo, the music cuts out, and then the ship goes punk into the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I think it's intentionally to like cut the drama of it to be
Probably,
like,
yeah.
don't worry, she's totally
Yeah.
fine.
Just
I think
a light
is the
like
idea.
thud.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh no, totally good.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Soft landing.
Yeah. Cut to Coruscant, and this is where we really hammer home this Senate plot that was. I wouldn't even. It was like, wasn't it A, B, C, D, E, F plot? It was like way down, like bottom third of the alphabet plot. But it's brought to the fore, right to the front here. Venestra is called into meeting with Senator Raincourt. This is the senator that Venestra was talking about early in the season, who was calling for an external review of the Jedi. She greets him in a control room. The senator is played by David Harewood, a character actor that I very much enjoy. Has been on a million CW shows, but a lot of voice acting over the years. Would play John Jones, Martian Manhunter, in Supergirl. Was on Homeland. What else we have here? Alan Wake 2 video game. I could probably go on for a while on this. He was really good in Supergirl. Again, same thing. On The Flash and Arrow, playing the same character. Man in the High Castle. Just a great character actor. So love to see him popping up here in Star Wars. He was in Killzone Shadowfall. That's funny. What else? Yeah, lots of video game stuff. A lot of Battlefield 3. Yeah, he played Captain Quentin Cole. I remember that, actually. Yeah, so it's been around a long time. His photo on IMDb is him standing up at Comic-Con, probably there for, who knows, a million different reasons. Yeah. Anyway, love to see him here. It's not entirely clear. Let me just double check. He's always played like an American, but he's from England. So this is like one of the first times I've actually heard him in a British accent. Yeah. Okay, so Jonathan Davis here asking, did we notice he said he was a Jedi a long time ago, talking about Chimera, I suppose, and he was very strong in episode 5 and can wipe memory. I think there's more to Chimera. I mean, 100%. Yeah. I mean, he's got all sorts of abilities, like being able to disappear like Batman. He can fly, which we talked about before.
Strong. Yeah.
Super strong, right? Which my only opinion on that was that he learned all that stuff from Plagueis.
Well, it's a mix, right? Like if you're a really strong Jedi or Padawan to begin with, and then you aren't using dark side stuff, and then you kind of turn to the dark side, and you have a new teacher that's teaching you all sorts of other nefarious things.
Not from a Jedi.
Yeah, right? Like you're going to be that much stronger. Like he's wild.
And we talked about, I think everyone was like, oh, well, his former master was probably Venestra.
Yeah.
Seems like that was seems almost confirmed. It's not fully confirmed here, but like she recognizes him. She says you. She says you. And then actually no, you're right. She does say a former pupil of mine.
Yeah, I thought she says a former pupil of mine.
He turned to evil, which of course is a reference to A New Hope, which is one of my favorite lines from Obi-Wan. A pupil of mine before he turned to evil.
And he's got that whip mark on his back. And when we're talking about this, we're like, I bet that he did something bad or whatever, something in her mind that
maybe
her to have to try
he
and
was
stop
having
him.
Maybe they were having an Anakin Obi-Wan moment, and she's like, nah, brah, I'm not letting this stand.
Well, remember when I said it was probably similar to the Kylo and Luke moment, where Luke sees the darkness and then
she's like, whip.
Yeah.
Oh, too late.
Yeah.
Although, man, it would be crazy to see what that wound looked like originally, because.
Right.
I'm just trying to imagine, like, I feel like a light whip would be hard to control because it can cut through anything.
Yeah.
So, including your flesh. So it's like you would have to like just graze the outside of him to like not cut him in half.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, I think you're 100% on there, Jonathan. That is there is more to that story. Hopefully, we'll see more of it. Okay. So Venestra meeting with. Senator Harewood or Rayancourt, whatever. Senator Hufflepuff. Ravenclaw. Never mind. Anyway, he starts with pleasantries and mentions her stomach, asking if her stomach is all right after her recent hyperspace travels. But she corrects him and says, in fact, it's her head that typically has the issue. What we talked about this before, but when she travels through hyperspace, she gets hyperspace visions or force visions. Yeah. So, again, another show having mentioned this twice now would have shown us her experiencing this crazy thing that happens to her when she travels through hyperspace. That would have maybe given her insights into what was going on,
Right.
and allowing her to like keep up with the plot that was not happening with her specifically.
Yeah.
Instead, we get nothing of that, and this is just used as a second wink to the comic, to the books, which isn't needed.
I feel like there's a little bit of this in one of the Thrawn books, not about her specifically, but about other people who kind of have this thing when they travel through hyperspace.
It's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Show it to me.
No, right?
Yeah.
I agree. Like, why can't we see her having these?
Do you think it's odd that this senator knows about her hyperspace stuff?
Sickness?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
That seems odd to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, apparently the reason that he came was because he heard a rumor that she was conducting a murder investigation without telling the Senate. That's a good reason to come in person and be like, "Hey, what's going on?" Right?
Someone's murdered? You didn't tell us?
Yeah, Venestra, who looks very uneasy, and basically looks uneasy the entire time.
Well, yeah.
By the way, not just this like scene, but like every time we see her, she's just like racked with stress constantly. Anyway, she looks uneasy, doesn't deny it, but says she wants to keep the matter internal, which apparently she has the right to do, given that there's no larger threat, quote unquote. Right. This is an internal investigation. There's no one else is involved, just Jedi. So
it's
no big
Jedi
deal.
things. Mind your own business.
He liked more certainty that there isn't, in fact, something larger. Like, how could you possibly know that? Though Venestra takes an odd tact here in trying to like calm him down by telling him that, don't worry, there were multiple Jedi victims. They're all Jedi. He's like, there were multiple victims?
Yeah. What?
Which is news to him, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, shit, I shouldn't have said that. Venestra says, quote, she's very close to apprehending the suspect and tries to cut off the meeting there, doubling down on this quote-unquote official position, right? Very close. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Even as he tries to press for more information by asking if the suspect is a Jedi. I guess, like, to me, it's weird to not talk about this further, because if your official stance is this is an internal matter because it's Jedi specific.
Right, yeah.
Then just be like, oh yeah, there was multiple Jedis who were killed. The suspect is in fact a Jedi.
Yeah, and we're handling it.
And we're handling it. Damn it! Because even if you tried to help me, there's nothing you could do to help me anyway.
Yeah, like as a senator, what are you going to do against another
assign some security, planetary security officers? No, that's not going to help.
Yeah.
Right? It's just going to lead to more deaths. Yeah. Anyway, as she tries to walk out, he changes the subject, pointing out that Venestra doesn't like him because he has a personal vendetta against a Jedi, which she agrees with. She's like, yeah, that sounds appropriate. That's about right.
Yeah, you're right.
Right? But in the spirit of honesty, we get to hear the senator's position on all of this made very clear. Quote, I think the Jedi are a massive system of unchecked power, posing as a religion, a delusional cult that claims to control the uncontrollable.
Mm-hmm.
So I like this scene because I think what the senator is saying is interesting and well articulated. I don't like this scene because this comes way too late.
Yeah.
If this was a like stance that the Jedi felt like we knew that the Jedi had this political machination thing. They're like, we have to protect their political standing, yada yada yada. But we didn't understand the context of it. So why are we only hearing this now? If we had known about this context that, this senator believes this because what they're really trying to do is bring, a system of checks and balances to this, it's kind of like how religions today don't have to pay taxes, where it's like, clearly this is being used as a loophole all the time,
all the time.
right? And it's like, so this is it just provides so much information to be like, this makes more sense why Venestra's so worried about this all the time.
Right, yeah.
But again, we only find this out in the first 10 minutes of the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's not right. It's just not how it should be done.
Yeah.
In my opinion. All right. So I think the Jedi are a massive system of unchecked power, posing as a religion. This does feel a little bit insulting, like to call them to talk to a Jedi and call them a cult.
Yeah.
Claims to control the uncontrollable. But again, he's basically framing hubris here, right?
Mm-hmm.
she says, "Oh no, the Jedi don't control the Force." Right?
Mhm.
He's like, "Oh no, I'm not talking about the Force. I'm talking about your emotions."
Yeah.
And so this calls back to something we talked about all season long, which is the Jedi are basically framed as Vulcans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And that's funny is in Star Trek all the time, the thing that like the thing where humans and Vulcans butt heads all the time is on the way they look at emotions.
Right.
And oftentimes someone will call out a Vulcan being like, you know, like it's silly to think that you can control your emotions when they're such an important part of who we are as individuals, right? And then the Vulcans always say it's not about controlling them, but it's about suppressing them. It's about not letting them control you,
Right. Yeah.
right? And which is, I think, by the way, is a valid perspective to take, which is that you can't ever eliminate your emotions.
No.
But you can't if you don't let them control you, you have more power. You don't want to allow this thing that's this ethereal thing in your brain to control you.
Of course. And that's kind of what the Jedi have always tried to do, right? It's not that they're unfeeling. They still feel. It's just they don't let it consume them, right? So.
Right. And Jonathan here saying, I didn't like the Jedi cover-up, but I wasn't trying to hate on the show like so many, which is fair. There's lots of good shit in this show that's worth liking.
Yeah.
The cover-up, I guess, where do you fall? Like, how do you feel about the cover-up in general? Like, let's skip to the end a little bit here and say,
I think it's
Vanessa goes and she says, oh, no, it was all Saul's fault.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
It's shady, obviously, but I do think it's just necessary. It's necessary to not...
It's like, what else would they say?
Yeah, it's necessary to not break some of the plot that we already have.
Right, so you can't break canon.
It's not breaking canon, right? It gets too complicated if you don't have
a tidy resolution.
Yeah, like it gets way too complicated on like, well, how do they not know that they're Sith if she knows and if she tells them or not tells them?
Well, I don't think she doesn't know that.
No,
so
that's
she doesn't
true.
know
She's
that they're
not
Sith.
necessarily covering up the fact that they're Sith. She's just covering up this whole...
She's covering up the fact that the Jedi were...
Well, she's covering up the girls, too.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, she's saying that there was Force witches.
Yeah.
Right?
But they all got wiped
she
out.
She doesn't know the story of the girls. She knows that they exist, but she doesn't know why they're important.
Yeah.
Because that secret was taken to the grave with Saul. Of course, obviously.
Yeah. Well,
Osha's the only one. Osha and Kymer are the only ones who know.
Yeah, and he gives that little look.
Oh my god. Yeah, he's like, excuse
me.
Yeah,
right. So yeah, I mean, I just think it's necessary. It's dirty. I feel bad for Saul's character that he's just getting blamed in death.
Right. Like this is
for her, and it's like, I'm just curious what her motivations are. Like, what she's so worried about. Like, it's,
This reminds me of like classic cop stories because you get these scenarios where like, hey, you tried to do the right thing, but something terrible happened. So we don't want to ruin your career. We're gonna cover it up internally.
She's like, oh, I don't want the rest of my buddies to get in trouble. And
we don't want the people to think the cops are bad.
And she doesn't want people meddling with her Jedi Order.
Right,
either.
And stuff like so. It's like they've got their priorities. Some of them are misaligned or whatever. But ultimately, they're trying to do it for the right reasons, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And then you have internal affairs, and they're like, you have to have this external audit. Be like, well, actually, these are the things that happen, and this is why it's bad, and like transparency is important, and yada yada yada.
Yeah.
Which they frame this senator, right, Senator Ravenclaw,
he's after them, like
as being after them, but he's really just calling for internal affairs.
Yeah, he's like,
we want someone to look at this who's not already a Jedi.
Yeah, it's like someone needs to keep you guys in check a little bit because you're kind of just going rogue and you can't just keep doing
I have to just take your word for it.
Yeah.
And you gave me all this information. They come clean, quote unquote, at the end of the episode. But like they just have to take their word for it and be like, okay, I guess that's what happened. But how do we know if there wasn't some other crazy thing that happened that you don't feel you've decided on your own free will that we don't
need to know? Yeah, it's right? Like there should be more of a discussion, which is what he's asking for. Yeah.
Anyway, so he goes on here. You project an image of goodness and restraint, but it's only a matter of time when one of you snap, and when, not if, that happens, who will be strong enough to stop him? I thought it was weird that he uses the pronoun him here.
Yeah, I thought that was weird too.
Because it's like,
why not them?
Not them, because most people would say them.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that like obviously not anti-pronoun here, but
No.
the use of it in this case is important because it feels like they're specifically calling out the Anakin thing.
I thought that was odd.
Where it's like, here's the only, if I really want to be like do mental gymnastics and do a lot of favors for the show, you could argue that there is a larger plot to take down the Jedi that Senator Ravenclaw is involved in.
Maybe.
That Plagueis is orchestrating. That doesn't come to fruition until later with
Sidious.
With Sheev.
Yeah.
And that this guy is maybe aware of a future event that has been foreseen.
Yeah.
Right? And is like, it's a slip of the tongue. He's saying because he knows that there's an event like, but I mean, that's no way. There's no way. There's no way.
It could be, but at its base level, it could also just be this character.
He's just making assumptions.
Maybe
he's just a misogynist.
Well, that's what I mean. That it would be like a dude, and it would be scarier if it's if it's a guy going real quick. Sometimes people that's the way they speak, right? So, but yeah, I thought it was funny too. I was like, yeah, why wouldn't he say them? But well, whatever. I don't really care.
Yeah, and Jonathan Davis says here, actually, now that you mention it, the Senate being strict could motivate all the cover-ups, but it's still acting out of fear.
Absolutely.
Which it's so the use of fear as a storytelling device in Star Wars is so fascinating because it was set up so early on as being this like pitfall for mistakes, right? That fear leads to, it's the first thing, the first step on the path of the dark side, right? So it's such a trap to let any fear control your decision making.
Yeah.
And at a large scale, like at an organizational scale, the fear of losing power to an external organization like the Senate, right, which feels to them like a power grab by the Senate, motivates them to make decisions that are ultimately bad for everyone, except for maybe the Sith, who, again, could be orchestrating a lot of this all from the shadows.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Anyway, I think it's cute that she reminds him that her opinion or his opinion isn't a minority one.
Yeah.
But he continues to push, saying, quote, "My colleagues can't imagine a galaxy without the Jedi, and I can understand why. When you're looking up at heroes, you don't have to face what's right in front of you, right? Which is the hypocrisy and the lying and the cover-ups and all that kind of stuff. That, when you put these people on a pedestal, this is true, by the way, of cops too, by the way. Yeah. When you put people on a pedestal, you make it very difficult to scrutinize their mistakes.
Yeah.
So, anyway, Ring King, 1978. I think this is a new chatter, so welcome. You never learned why the Jedi thought these people were bad. We just saw the act, and you never learned why the Jedi thought these people were bad. We just saw the act, and they tried to show the twins, and no one cares about. I lost it at the end there. If you want to correct what you said, I think what they're saying is that who is they in this scenario? The Senate. The Senate thought the Jedi were bad, but we just saw the act, and they tried to show the twins, and no one cares about. What was it? You lost me, Ring King. Clear it up. I'll come back to it. We'll come back to it. We'll circle back.
I think they're saying you never learned why the Jedi thought that the witches were bad.
Oh.
We just saw the act, and they tried to show to the twins. They try to show that to the twins, and no one cares about what the issue was.
The actual issue, the underlying issue was to begin with.
Yeah,
I guess. What was it that the witches were doing bad? I guess the point of that's kind of a part of this as well, right? Which is that some of it was taken out of context, that they made this decision unilaterally without, investigating further, better understanding what was going on. That being said, I think if they do truly believe, what they did, quote unquote, wrong was create life using the Force, and that's a power that is beyond what any one individual or group should control, though, including the Jedi.
Yeah.
So they were acting out of and motivated by this need to uncover this Force mystery, ultimately, which they felt potentially put these people in danger. If someone is truly one consciousness in two bodies, those people are in danger because they can be used for terrible things. So, again, giving Saul the most benefit of the doubt, being that he understood that as a massive risk and wanted to extricate themselves from a scenario where they could be exploited.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
Rinking goes on here. There were no backstory on the Jedi characters and the twin characters. I never cared what happened. Well, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
That's a criticism of like the character development and not having enough time.
Right.
Throughout
more
the
time
series, we needed a few more episodes. Yeah.
Right. Imagine we could have spent, more time in flashback, but spaced out a little bit more. We got to experience their childhood a little bit more, why those things mattered. We just never. This show just never had the time.
There's a little bit of a point to not knowing Saul and Kalnaka and Torben. Like, I think there's a point to that. I don't think
they're just generic
we weren't
Jedi.
Supposed to care about them because the story's not like necessarily.
It's not about them.
Right.
Yeah.
So I do think that
Saul,
it is about them. Yeah, we do care about Saul.
We do learn a lot about
Saul.
About him.
But I do think there was some part kind of point as to not, showing them in like this super big positive light because the story isn't necessarily about the Jedi.
And as Jonathan mentions here, they weren't bad. The Jedi weren't bad. They just made a mistake. And that the mistake that the worst part of that mistake was not owning up to it and instead doubling down on, and again, the motivations are all, as I think as Mother Anastasia says, right, they're noble intentions.
Yeah.
Right? They had noble intentions, which was extricate these girls from danger. When everything fell apart and accidents happened, they didn't want to make things even worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
By saying, okay, well, if we follow through with, taking Osha in front of the High Council, telling them everything that happened, they'll send Osha away as an orphan.
Yeah.
And part of what the series of mistakes that were made here was that Saul made selfish decisions. He said that he only wanted to do what was best for Osha, but that's not entirely true.
Right.
He was lying to himself and to May when he said that because he wanted a Padawan.
Yeah.
And he felt a connection with Osha, and he, in spite of everything that happened, didn't do, quote-unquote, the right thing. He did the thing that he felt would give her the best outcome because he, quote-unquote, loves her,
right,
as is said explicitly in this episode, but also what he felt like he needed to do to satisfy himself.
Yeah.
The selfish steps, as Vanessa says later. Okay. Rinking here, they make the Wookiee raging beast, and that they are very intelligent. Wasn't a Wookiee Grandmaster in Legends. I think the idea here is they've actually framed Kalnaka as being like a tech genius person, or like at least and as being very smart. We do know that Wookiee are very noble and smart and have a lot of wisdom, and they live a long time and all that kind of stuff. The point is, he was not in control of his faculties here, right?
Yes.
He was being
possessed, kind of
possessed.
Thing, yeah. So they were just using his body and his strength. And,
right.
Yeah.
We know that Wookiees are also super strong.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it was one of the things that was brought up that we didn't mention last week, which is the idea of like a something claw in the like a Wookiee outcast. Apparently, in the Wookiee, in their culture, their claws are they have sharp claws, but they're only to be used as like tools for building or positive things. And if you ever use your claws to like commit harm and violence, that's like a grave sin.
Oh, interesting.
And that you are an outcast from the Wookiee culture.
Interesting.
And that he ultimately did use his claws to harm Torben.
Yeah.
Not on purpose, obviously, but because of that, he's then seen by the Wookiees as this outcast, which is part of the reason maybe he went into exile in the first place.
Yeah.
Interesting idea. Thought that should be worth mentioning. Okay. So Vanessa had enough of the conversation. She uses the Force to open the door to usher him out.
Yeah.
But he has one final remark. He says, quote, "I have reported your lack of transparency to Chancellor Drellick. He may invite you to a Senate tribunal for an update. I hope, for your sake, you have this suspect in custody by then. Good luck. And what is it you say? Oh, yes. May the Force be with you."
Yeah.
Which feels like a little bit of a dig, but I think if you look at it from a different perspective, he's really giving her a lot of freedom here.
Yeah.
Which is to say, all I've said was you haven't been fully transparent with us, and I reported that to the chancellor. I think that's entirely reasonable. He may invite you to a Senate tribunal, right? That's not like I haven't requested one, or you're going to need to, to come clean. It's like just be prepared that might happen. I'm giving you fair warning, right?
Yeah.
I think you would be do yourself a favor by having this situation sorted up in time to kind of wrap this up and not position yourself in any worse light, right? I actually think that Senator Ravenclaw here would, if he hadn't said like just a couple things, right? He does ultimately come across as having a personal vendetta.
Yeah.
But if he had kind of been a little bit more political, right? And a little bit more even-handed, and kind of cut out of things about like the delusional cult, for instance, and some of these other things, and kind of position it as, hey, you're this extension of the government, but you don't answer to the government. And I think that that's problematic. I would like to see that change, and like really position that as this very reasonable position to take. Instead, they really kind of frame it as he does have a grudge.
Yeah, he's going in
right?
hard at them at this point. So it's you understand the motivations behind her feeling the more need to cover this shit up, right? So.
Oh, Ranking. Did we ever see Yoda at all? Because I stopped watching after episode 5. Yes, technically we see the back of his head.
Yeah.
We see the back of his head as the last shot of this entire season. Yeah. Yeah, and then Black Chrysanthemum was also clearly not, by the way, Ranking here. Black Chrysanthemum was an arena fighter. He used his claws. Yes.
Well,
but he was also
a slave. He was forced in there by the Trandoshans.
Yeah, and also clearly not like a member of like traditional Wookiee society.
No, he's not. He's
he's also
a bounty hunter.
A bounty hunter. Right. Yeah. So I think and then Jonathan Davis here, and Dara telling them not to get involved in episode 7 reminded me of Ripley from Aliens. Love Aliens. That's all I have to say on that. Love Aliens, great movie. No notes. Okay. Any thoughts on this? More thoughts?
No.
We've talked it to death. Okay. Mystery Planet. We go back to the Mystery Planet. Chimere and Osha walk to the ship. On the way, Chimere complains that she won't tell him where they're going.
I do like their dynamic.
Right, and he's like, did I give you the impression I was a fair person? And I just love Osha's remarks. He's like, yeah, you did, actually. You said you were giving May a hard time by not following through with her promise. So if you feel like people need to follow through with their promises to you, you should feel committed to following through with your promises to others. Right? And so he's like, God damn it, you got me there. Because it comes off as like a little bit like emo. It's like, don't you think I'm a badass? Didn't you notice how badass I am? She's like, oh, yeah, I noticed, but I also noticed that you're not nearly as badass as you say.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, he seems very reluctant to agree to this whole thing, but he changes the subject, asking if she would consider being trained by him. She thinks about it, but says no. He gives her one, quote-unquote, last chance to change her mind. Mm-hmm. And she says, like, quote-unquote, I told you I'm not my sister.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, every time she now says this, she is, in fact, her sister, which is a interesting kind of way to frame it.
Interesting.
Right? And he says, you're definitely not. May made the deal without even thinking about it. Which... I love this little interaction because it gives Osha so much context about like the background that Chimere gives us ultimately as well. Mm-hmm. More background about Chimere and May's relationship, which we barely get any background on, which is unfortunate. Mm-hmm. And understanding her frame of mind versus Osha's frame of mind, her willingness to just jump into this, deal with the devil, essentially, where May or Osha being much more thoughtful about it. It's just like it's a cool contrast. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this I love how it also like she hears that from Chimere and she's like, huh, she would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tracks.
Yeah. Okay, so as they take off on the ship, we cut back to Chimere's cave, and as we see the music picks up. It comes into a bit of a crescendo and adds some choral elements, maybe tribal elements, one might say. We see a hooded figure reach out from the shadows.
Long
Darth Plagueis
fingers.
himself glimpsed for the first time, I think, in live action.
Oh, yeah.
Well, certainly in live
Yeah.
action, but I'm not sure if we've ever seen him in any
Yeah.
visual medium.
Oh yeah.
Have we has he been in comics in canon?
I don't know canon. I don't know which comics are canon or not at this point, but I
And
mean, you can like
let's
Google
see.
pictures of him. And they come
Well, yes,
up.
I know because he has a cover of a book, and stuff like that. But I'm just thinking, I don't know if he's ever been glimpsed on screen. Well, he's certainly never on screen. But
No, it's been in like comic books and
yeah, so I'm just
Yeah.
looking here at some of the sources. He's mentioned a million times, but I don't. Again, I don't think. I think this is the first time we've ever.
it's definitely probably the first like I don't not the first, but it's the most recent like canonization of what he
Mhm.
looks like.
So yeah, he's immune or moon or
Mun.
however you want to say it, Mun.
Because yeah, there's all
Um,
this.
Yeah, and like we've seen. I mean, there's been a million fan arts, and
Yeah.
there's the cover of his book, which was one of the last non-canon books before they switched over to the Disney stuff.
Yeah.
And you got to give Wikipedia credit because they used this very shadowy image of him as his like main picture on
Yeah.
Wikipedia. So yeah, Darth Plagueis, I'm just reading here from Wikipedia, was a Force-sensitive, male-immune, dark Lord of the Sith and Sith Master of Darth Sidious. Plagueis lusted for immortality, believing the secret laid in science. To that end, he worked with a Sith apprentice, conducting research into bioengineering, experimenting with his ability to influence the midichlorians to create life. In doing so, Plagueis acquired considerable knowledge of the Force, but he was ultimately betrayed and murdered by his own apprentice in accordance with the rule of two. In his sleep, no doubt.
Yes.
No less, right?
Yes.
So here's the deal. We know when he died, 32 BBY.
Yeah.
There's no canon official birth date
Right.
for Darth Plagueis, so we don't know. We don't have a sense of how long Mune lived.
Mhm.
I'm gonna keep calling it Mune. I think it sounds better.
It's like hundreds. I would assume in the hundreds, 100 around there years.
The thing is, I think there's some bristling about like the distinction of what we think we knew of these characters in the pre-canon or in the pre-Disney era, right? The Legends era,
Right.
versus what our understanding. I thought there was a potential. People were saying, oh, maybe Chimera is in fact Plagueis. That they would have changed retconned his species,
yeah.
changed a few things around. That was still up for grabs. I think it's actually a real nod to
Yeah.
longtime
Yeah.
Legends readers that they kept the Mune thing. Sure, okay. We don't know for sure how old in canon Plagueis was when he died.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
So far.
And so that still has time to
I
be
think
revealed.
That's fine. Like we don't need to know exactly how old he is at any point in time. It's like, okay, cool, he's there. So let's sort of. I'm not saying move along, but it's just like it's neat that he's there. It's neat that he's in this timeline and he's involved. So I'm like, that's awesome. Now we can go from there. Like, is he already experimenting with life force and creating life, or does he just learn about it from Chimera now because of these twin girls? Or like
Well,
the
thing is,
the
he-
dyad kind of not dyad, but you know what
It's
I mean.
interesting. He could have read.
No, that's
Um,
different.
Yeah. So okay. So Ring King. Couple questions here. Is he the same species as Cad Bane? No. Cad Bane is a Duros.
Yeah, he's blue.
And they blue with red eyes. Which would have been too on the nose.
and they're
for,
not. Muns are really like tall and
They're tall,
skinny. They have
long,
really long,
yes.
creepy fingers.
They
have,
look
a
like
long
traditional
face.
aliens, like from
Yeah.
like the old timey
Yeah.
version of what
They're
aliens
gray.
look like. They are typically, when you think of the banking clan, so we've seen them in live action before.
Is that the same?
In the prequels.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, they're
It's
the banking clan
yeah.
people.
Yes.
Creepy looking, extra creepy looking when they have Sith eyes. So this is where it's important to note: Chimera does not have Sith eyes, but neither does Dooku.
No, Dooku doesn't. Yeah.
Right. So I think one of the people were like, "Oh, hey, what's the deal with all these Sith walking around without Sith eyes?"
But is Dooku a Sith?
He's Darth
He
Tyrannus.
is Darth Tyrannus. You're right.
So
I always thought the Sith eyes thing was a little more like intense.
I think it's first of all,
Unclear.
I don't think they've ever defined it, and second of all, I think that there's a bit of a problem where they've painted themselves into a corner scenario where they introduce this idea of the Sith eyes thing, and then
some have it, some don't.
Some have it, some don't.
'Cause it'd
When
be
does it
too
appear?
obvious.
How does it appear? Right? So, like, I think that thing is yet to be defined.
Yeah.
And I think until it is defined, and if they maybe don't want to define it, they will use it for story purposes
They
as
also
they see
go
fit.
away. Like, if you, to me, I've always thought of the Sith eyes coming out when they're more full of hatred and they're more full of that, like,
They're
raw,
fully
consumed
by the dark side.
Because I think you see
Yeah.
those Sith eyes fade.
I thought I was
Anakin
seeing. So when you said that May had the lightsaber in her eye at the beginning, I thought I was seeing the Sith eyes
Sith eyes,
appearing
yeah.
in her.
I thought it
and
was
then
too, but I looked
fading.
really close and I was like, no,
Right,
it's like
okay.
a reflection. It's a lightsaber.
So either way, it's cool to see it here. The problem with this cameo is it makes no sense.
You don't think it
Because
makes sense?
It only makes sense. Okay, it does make sense to some degree. It connects this to this larger Sith concept, right?
Yeah.
And fully defines Kymir as a member as the Sith. He says, "You might call me a Sith." Earlier, that left
might.
the door open to say that they was something else, or maybe he's, a Knights of Ren or whatever. But
Yeah.
now we know that he's directly affiliated with Plagueis in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting, but ultimately we got no further information as to how or why. So on its own, without any more seasons of the Acolyte to come, if they choose not to make any more seasons, it feels very like, hey, look at this kind of thing,
I
as
mean,
opposed to like a
there's-
truly meaningful, because it doesn't play into the plot at all.
No. I definitely think that it can go two ways still. Like, it is possible that he doesn't know Plagueis, and Plagueis is just there creeping around being like, oh, interesting, look at these two. Like, that is
Right.
possible. Another kind of not theory, but if you kind of look back on the way Kymir was talking to May at the beginning when he's like talks about the master, I don't think he's talking about himself necessarily. I think he is
Yeah.
sometimes talking about Plagueis, and like when she kind of defects and he says he'll kill you, like I think he is talking about Plagueis, and I think he means like he'll make me kill you, like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Because we have seen like Dooku had Asajj as like an apprentice or like an assassin, whatever, training under him, and like Sidious was aware of that, knew about it, was fine with it. It doesn't really break that rule of two because they're not Sith. It's like it's only about being a big Sithy Sith. Like it's not.
Right.
You're allowed to have underlings. You're allowed to have these like other dark side users around you. I think.
Well, the
it's-
true rule of two is that the one with power, the other craves it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they understand that concept
Mhm.
to some degree. I mean, Rin King talks about how Dooku was never a full Sith. I disagree. I think he was. He says he wanted Obi-Wan as an ally. How many times have Sith trying to convert
All the time. They're always trying
Jedi
to
all the time?
collect.
To be honest, they're the best Sith farm you
Yes,
can have,
yeah.
which is a whole school of Force students
Yeah.
that you can corrupt in some form or fashion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, it's who is ultimately the like head Sith master at any given point, I think is really where you get like the most strict
Yeah.
interpretation of the rule of two concept.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously it's Plagueis right now, and then it's Sidious later for many years.
Yeah.
So anywho, any other thoughts on Plagueis as a cameo here?
I thought it was great. I thought it was cool. I was pumped about it.
I think it looked really
It
cool.
looks
I
cool.
I think he looks cool, although his fingers look like the
salad
rocks.
fingers?
They
Oh.
look like the rock. They're the same exact
I mean,
color as
yeah,
the
but he's
rocks that he's touching. It's
gray.
weird.
What do you expect?
Yeah, no, I get it. It's fine.
I think that's just part of it. He blends right in, right? He's a creep. But I thought it was great that we got that cameo.
It's cool. Like I said, it's cool looking. I think it's funny that he's like creeping behind this wall.
Mhm.
It's all the aesthetic. I get
Yeah.
it. It's
It's
cool,
got that
but
horror aspect still
Yes.
too. Like that's kind
Yeah.
of part of the theme that's been running
Yes.
through this. That like the plinking of the strings and all that. It's yeah.
Okay, so we get to Brendok. We cut to a shot of the Coven's fortress. This is a new angle that I didn't realize this before, that shows that the main section of the fortress where we spend most of our time is like suspended above the rest by like one bridge.
Yeah, it's cool.
Which is cool. I just didn't know. And it's like a triangle. Everything is triangle shaped over there. So, anywho, interesting. We pan to Saul's ship. He's landed safely on the planet. We see him inside the cockpit thinking, deciding to turn on his transceiver, right? As he said, he wanted to bring the Jedi here, so he follows through with that. He leaves his ship, and we see him use the Force. It's unclear for what. So what's he doing here? He steps out of his ship. He does, and then nothing happens. And he's just reaching out.
I think
sensing.
he's just kind of, I think he's kind of sensing, like for May, or to just get like a tracking,
bearing.
almost bearings. Yeah. Trying to maybe feel the convergence, like which way to go, the divergence.
Yeah,
that big hole in the ground.
It's weird. It's weird to show people using the Force without showing us what they're doing with it.
It's true.
In my opinion. Anyway, Basil is still on board and watches him from the cockpit as Saul makes his way towards the fortress. We get no further understanding of Basil's motivations, as you mentioned. Back on Coruscant, Venestra is having a brief audio conversation with someone. She's desperately trying to contact someone. Quote, "This is highly unorthodox, but I shall see what I can do," says the person over the phone. In my opinion, this is, I think, supposed to be a red herring, this whole sequence of events here, playing into this angle that she is, in fact, the big bad of the season, which I guess she is technically if you look at it from a certain point of view. But I think, given what we see at the end of the episode, she's probably trying to reach Yoda. That's my
Probably, yeah. Because like when she goes to talk to him at the end, it kind of makes sense why she needs to go talk to him, and she's scheduling a meeting with him or whatever, right?
Yeah, she's like, hey, there's some crazy shit happening. You guys are really going to want to know. I know you're busy meditating for the last 50 years or whatever you're doing, but this is very important, right? But I think the idea here is it's like, oh, is she contacting Plagueis? Because we now tease Plagueis, right? So is there some connection there?
Any connection?
No, she doesn't. But I think the idea is that the show is positioning it as a red herring.
Oh, I see. I see. Yeah.
To kind of like cast doubt on her motivations.
I see.
So Mog storms in, telling Venestra that they found Saul and that he's turned on his transponder beacon, and he's on Brendok. She has Mog prepare her ship and, quote, gather as many knights as you can without raising alarm. Again, don't tell anyone what we're doing, but we need a bunch of knights with swords to come with us, deal with something right now. And I was like, oh, really? Why do we need all these Jedi for? Are you expecting a confrontation? And she's like, no, a resolution.
Yeah.
Right? Again, I think this whole scene being a red herring about her motivation.
Yeah.
So it's just weird that we don't get any more context to her like larger cover-up plan here. Really, like who's she talking to and why. I would have liked to spend more time with Venestra in general this season. Okay, so Brendok, Osha and Chimera arrive on Brendok. We get to see more of the ship. It's very Sith appropriate that has the pilots don't ride together, but on separate cockpits on opposite sides of the ship. Which reminds me of that funny like ship that guides the Millennium Falcon into Cloud City. That's like two little pods on a stick.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Two little pods on a stick, yeah.
Right? So you have like, you can drive on the left or drive on the right.
Yeah.
Ring King, I still think Yoda had to notice Jedi dying if there were a few in a row by a dark side user. Yes. I mean,
if no one tells him, how's he going to know?
It depends on how many die. Obviously, if you have a bunch of Jedi dying, it seems like Jedi can sense that.
Yeah, but
right?
like they're not dying all at once. It's just like Jedi probably die all the time.
The only time that we've seen Jedi sense random deaths are
big ones.
Order 66, when a bunch of Jedi die around the exact same moment,
Alderaan.
right? And Alderaan, right? When what does he say? With millions of people
cried out
all
at once,
cried out,
were silenced.
And suddenly silence.
Yeah, it's usually big events that they can just feel from anywhere. I feel like just a few random deaths, he's not gonna sense them, but.
Right, and so question, would Dooku be a Padawan now? No, he's probably not even born yet.
No.
Yeah. But soon. He'll be born soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. On what planet is he born on?
Starts with an S.
It's like Sicily,
Scipio?
But it's not. No, it's not. That's not right. It's not Scipio.
No,
he's the Count of blank, and I can't remember the name of his planet.
Sacco Minor.
No, that's not it either. Stop
I'm
telling you,
not
it's not
looking
it. You figure it out. Anyway, he's not yet born to the royal family on his planet that we spent time on in multiple series in books. Okay,
Sereno.
Sereno. Yeah. Okay. So it was like in Sicily. I told you it was like Sicily.
Yeah, that's right. Sorrento. Sereno.
Yes, born on the planet of the Kia Sorrento. Okay. Anyway, I think it's cute that she locks out his controls, because again we get this little like back and forth about it's a race, right? So she locks out Chimere's controls, but it's just played on for barely at all. Okay, so she plans to land the ship nearby, noting that there's nowhere like specific to land, but there's somewhere close, but that they're not the first to arrive. So cut to Sol, who spots them flying by. We see him walk past the dark hole in the ground. Again, I guess. So we mentioned that it's similar to the one on Octo 2 that Ray falls into. My sense, I guess, or our sense is that this is the dark side well of the Virgins. If you assume that the Virgins has both a good and dark side, just like all, or light and dark side, just like all parts of the Force are, presumably this is the dark side element specifically.
The pit. The big scary pit, usually the dark
side.
Side.
That always appears as a hole in the ground. Yeah. So I guess like we were like, why do they keep praying to this weird hole in the ground? I guess it makes more sense in retrospect that they were praying to the dark side well of the Virgins.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. Okay, so Sol enters the main area. We see it now, overgrown. This is the third different set dressing for this specific set, right? We've seen it clean and unbroken, destroyed and burned, and now destroyed and overgrown. So they made good use of this set.
Yeah.
And we also get to see more of like the hallways and stuff in this episode. Crazy that they never bothered to introduce this like area to us in like a satisfying way until the final episode. So Sol takes in the surroundings and calls out to May, thinking she may have already made it before him. He hears like an audio flashback, an audio cue to May screaming for her mom. This is basically designed to put him back in his state of mind that he was when shit was going down 16 years ago.
Yes.
Osha and Chimera arrive at the lift. She calls it an elevator, though, which I think is weird. I always assumed in Star Wars they were lifts, but now it's just which is maybe a British thing. But I swear I've never heard them call it an elevator before.
Yeah,
I could be wrong about that. That people talk about lore breaking. This might be the only thing that actually is.
I mean, it's not like the word elevator, like because it makes sense because it elevates you, right? So I'm not like super upset about it. Like that's an English word, but
but like they don't call it coffee either. So you know what I'm saying.
True.
Rinking asks, why is it that all the Jedi who do bad stuff are human Jedi? This is a simple answer for you, because all the actors who play Jedi are humans, and it's easier to emote all the emotions that a angry Jedi is feeling, unless, of course, you're Anakin and you're strapped with... It's just unfortunate. He's just not a great actor. But that's why.
Yeah.
It's just a lot easier to show that stuff on a human face, because we can as an audience relate to it more. There also seems to be a lot of human Jedi in the Order in general.
Right.
As like a ratio, I don't know if it's like a 60-40, like all 60% human and 40% the rest.
Though, where it's like more rare for a like certain species to be force sensitive, because like I know Wookiees especially are more rare to be force sensitive. There's also a Trandoshan Jedi at one point, and that's crazy rare too.
Yeah.
So it's just more rare in certain species to be Jedi in general.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Okay, so they get on this elevator, or they plan to get on this elevator. She believes that's the only way in, suggesting that the only alternative is to climb, which is a funny nod to the Sol climbing the mountain twice. But when she looks back, Chimere's gone, pulled another Batman.
Yeah.
But all she can hear is him in her head saying, "Are you sure?"
Yeah. So funny.
Which I think is pretty funny. You're right. And then, what do you think? Is he flying up there, or what's he doing?
I would assume, he's doing his little... Floating. He's like, well, I can fly.
Just floating up the side of the mountain. I love to just cut to a wide shot of him just floating up the side of the mountain. Hilarious.
Yeah. We have yet to see him fly. We've only seen him float down. So.
Right. Yeah. Maybe it's more of a glide.
Yeah.
Or as the this is a great line from Chronicles of Riddick, which is one of my favorite. It's my favorite Riddick movie, which I know is like an unpopular opinion because most people like Pitch Black and Riddick and some of the other ones.
I have not seen any.
they're more horror movies, but Chronicles of Riddick is like a Star Wars inspired adventure movie.
Oh, okay.
And that's why I like it so much. And then there's this great scene with the Dame Judi Dench, who plays a air spirit or something or whatever, and she's like, we don't so much fly as we do float. And then she just like falls out of a ship and just like floats down. So maybe that's his power.
Yeah.
He has the same power as the air spirits from Chronicles of Riddick.
I like that.
Anyway, but back with Saul, we hear some very melancholy music as he investigates the same area where he originally saved Osha. It seems to give him the heebie-jeebies, though, so he doesn't stay long. The camera pans down, and we see a hand emerge from the pit. It's May. I put Osha there. May climbing up the original way she fell.
Mm-hmm.
So presumably she fell, grabbed the edge, climbed down.
She said she got sucked into the...
Oh, she got sucked into that thing? Oh, just kind of like Luke did at the bottom of that that thing on Cloud City?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. She said she got sucked into that, whatever, airway thing.
Okay,
Mhm.
cool. That makes more sense
Yeah.
than, since she was a kid.
Mhm.
May, hearing Saul call for her, gets distracted, and she spots her in Osha's old room, so that she has to do some memory searching. Osha, meanwhile, gets the elevator working again. Back with Saul, his search for May continues, but instead, he finds Chimere, or the Stranger, as they like to prefer to call it.
Yes.
Quote, "Thank you for leading me to her. We make a great team," which I think is a little bit meta because I guess how do you frame that? Like, what's your take on that line first?
I mean, I feel like a lot of times with Chimere or the Stranger, he's trying to get in their head. He's trying to mess with them, right? So, but yeah, I mean, it's also a bit of like, I think he's maybe talking about Osha. Like Saul ended up leading him to Osha through May and through all this shit that happened, like at Brendock, right? So he's like, oh, you basically led me to my new Acolyte because May didn't work out, so I got a new one now.
Yeah, and I like to think of it as kind of like they make a great team because neither of these girls would be in a position to fall to the dark side if it wasn't for anything.
Absolutely, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Rinklin says, Cloud City has lots of air up there, though.
Yeah.
Because it's a city in the sky. Yes, but they also this is a thing in a mountain, so it's a long way to fall, and it's an ore collecting chamber, so it's designed to suck stuff up.
Yeah.
So, I think we can give that the benefit of the doubt here, guys. Let's not nitpick the stuff that's like we already know she survived.
Yeah. It's like an air intake. It would make sense that it had whatever, but yeah.
Yes, there's plot holes all throughout Star Wars. Congratulations, you found another one. Anyway, back with Saul. He finds Chimere, as I mentioned before. Chimere wastes no time and immediately lights his saber and attacks Saul. More views of the hallways and walkways, as I mentioned before, as they make their way through the hallways. This reminded me a little bit of the Mustafar fight, with them like walking through those doorways and like lightsabers going off the sides, which is cool. And then we get the really cool shot of their like blades like cutting through the wall.
Yeah, I like that.
That's really
that was
cool.
really good. It's a very nice little detail.
All of the lightsaber stuff has been pretty good.
It's been so good. That's one thing with this show. Like all of the fighting, all the combat has been really well done. It's been intriguing and interesting and different. It's not the same dueling as we've seen before.
No, and it's certainly more interesting than we saw in the sequel trilogies. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It certainly has a prequel-esque feel without as much of maybe like the...
Well, it's less acrobatic. Right?
But, even though they're doing the wire work, which adds a little bit of a different angle.
It was giving me more like old school kung fu movies with and like a little bit of the Matrix when they're fighting, and I like it. It's got a really cool feel to it.
I mean, I think it's funny because it's like they should have been using wires the whole time.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's like it makes so much sense.
Yeah, because it's just the way they float is like so much cooler. It's like, oh yeah, like I love that. It's great. Yeah.
Ring King, how does Saul get an apprentice? Don't they all the Jedi train with Yoda first? Well, I think the sentiment is that as a Padawan, you join like a large group. As a youngling, you join a large group of younglings, and you're trained by multiple masters, right? You go to the Yoda class, and you do meditation. You go to the Soul class, because we see him teaching a bunch of...
It's like grade school.
Yeah. And then once you graduate to full Padawan status, a Jedi Master selects you as their Padawan.
Yeah, you have one master.
Yes. But we've seen exceptions made to this before. Several of them. Barasafi, for instance, gets to specifically be trained by her master because they're the same species. And
Yes,
there's like a cultural thing there.
Anakin,
obviously, because
Obi-Wan,
he, Obi-Wan, would have been, of course, if he hadn't been killed, stabbed to the chest. But,
that's the whole argument about her being too old.
There's a whole thing.
Right,
Yeah, I mean, that they make exceptions for these types of things from time to time. Okay, so we get some, again, this really cool wirework stuff as he leaps from the bridge down towards Saul. He does this cool, like, dodging glide. It's very cool. The StarWars.com says this is a direct homage to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Okay, that's kind of the feel I got from it. It was very, like, kung fu movie. I loved it.
So, quote, "I will destroy you if I must," which reminds me, of course, again, of
Obi-Wan.
the Mustafar.
If I must.
Yeah, if I must. Right. You're going down a path I can't follow. Not if she gets to you first, right? Which is a fun kind of like, oh, I didn't realize you were being hunted this whole time, but not by who you thought, right? Because he's here assuming that May is there to kill Saul.
Yeah.
But she's not. That's good stuff. I'll give them credit for that. So Kymir goes with he's like, enough of this. Let's do two blades here. He's gonna go to the dual wielding. Saul is able to disarm one of his hands, also prevents him from calling it back with the Force. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
He like disarms him. He tries to pull it back and he like slashes at it. That's cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of just like different ways of fighting in this, which was very, very neat. It's
the styles change. We get like different. They're like they grapple. There's exactly. It's very cool. Yeah. No notes on the lightsaber combat here.
Great. It's super exciting.
We also get some really cool force kicks to the chest, like Mortal Kombat style.
Yeah, the like running ones.
Yeah. Awesome moments as Saul centers himself and uses he turns the saber off, puts it on his hip, then like meditates and like does this like force push that as like multiple flying sabers and chimeras coming at him. It's really
blows
cool.
Everything back. It was great, and I did like him throwing the sabers and then calling them back, and like it was all very, very good.
Right. So really cool when he like reignites his saber. You get a very traditional samurai stance, from like pointing the blade like angled downwards. It's really cool. So that's badass.
I love seeing more like samurai stuff in Star Wars.
Yes, 100%.
It's some of my favorite like fighting styles.
Yeah, samurai fights. I mean, if you watch any samurai movie, it's like, this shit's badass.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Osha finds May in their old room. Anyway, note the I think it's interesting here because they basically switch clothes.
Yeah, they have switched clothes. Yeah,
but we get the contrast between the light clothes and the dark clothes because they've also swapped positions, right, from a mentality perspective. So that's cool. Ring King, what role was Dave Filoni supposed to have had, because the story doesn't seem like a Filoni story or characters? So he's taken over recently. I think it was end of last year. He was promoted to like executive story. I can't remember what his title was, but he essentially oversees the creative works at Lucasfilm, and he can choose to get as involved or not as involved as he really wants to. So we know he has some oversight because he has oversight in all the creative stuff that's happening at Star Wars right now. I would say there's been an interesting like roller coaster with our friend Dave Filoni, because for a while he was seen as like, when The Mandalorian came back, he was like, could do no wrong, right? He had taken over for Lucas with the Clone Wars and then Rebels and was just crushing it, right? Everyone's like, this guy's great. He understands it. He's picked up where George Lucas left off. He understands the assignment, right? That being said, Dave Filoni is not a flawless creator. We've talked about his reluctance to kill his own characters.
Yeah.
It's a mass. It's like it's it's a big blind spot for him, right? I think he has a particular understanding of what the Star Wars tone is. He's learned that from Lucas and all that kind of stuff. I think there is a world where Star Wars could evolve beyond the myopic view of what George Lucas thought Star Wars can be. This show is a great example where if they had allowed it to be in a very different tone, it might not have felt as Star Wars-y. This is a critique of Andor. People are like, that doesn't feel like Star Wars to me, which is totally fair because it doesn't have that same adventure-y vibe, right? But ultimately was able to create something really powerful because it was able to be freed from that preconceived notion.
Yeah.
You could do a lot of work with Star Wars if you escape that need for it to feel like this adventure movie. So, I think they good with the bad with Dave Filoni. I think he's got a very strong grasp of this. I don't think he has. I think he has yet to understand or grasp the potential for live action visual storytelling. He's done animation his entire life, and this maybe is unfair. Monday Morning Quarterback, etc. But his shows could look better, is my opinion. They look flat. They're lit pretty flat. There is an element there of maybe having a little bit more of a dramatic take on some of this stuff that would help him. Anyway.
Yeah.
Dave kind of needs Jon Favreau, who likes to bring light and fun while Dave goes too dark. I don't necessarily agree with I think they do have a good balance.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's necessarily where they fall in the spectrum there. I think there's a little bit of both from each.
Yeah.
So he gets the blame even if he never made the show, but the show was started before he got this job. I mean, I don't think he should be getting the blame or credit for any of these things unless he was the direct creator of that show. And
I don't think he is really getting blamed for the show, is he?
No. Everyone would prefer to blame
the
Catherine Kennedy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so OSHA finds May in her old room. We talked about the contrast between their outfits. Quote, everything that's happened here, all because you didn't want me to become a Jedi. It's an interesting way for OSHA. This is, again, another glimpse into OSHA's psyche that we don't really get much of.
Right.
She's thinking of, like, this, if you had just let me live my life,
yeah,
none of this would have happened, right? And so that's just where she kind of maintains that grudge,
yeah,
right? May tries to tell her that Sol lied to her, but OSHA cuts her off because, again, if this shows nothing, it's a bunch of people cutting each other off.
Yeah.
Sol never blamed you, OSHA continues. He tried to teach me that someone that I loved could be capable of this level of destruction. And I failed. I could never learn to calm my negative emotions, my hatred of you, my grief over my mother. So I never became a Jedi. So I guess in the end, you got what you wanted. So it's really interesting to think of OSHA struggling with this her entire life. She feels she never had closure because Sol never gave her all the information. Instead, she poured these negative emotions into how she feels about her sister, again, because Sol didn't help her deal with those emotions, and then ultimately positioned her for her fall here.
Yeah.
It is, again, you try to take Sol's perspective. He's saying, like, hey, you need to learn to forgive your sister and move on from that, but she never could. And she sees that as a weakness in her own self. Whereas Sol's saying if she was able to do that, she could have stepped beyond herself and become a Jedi.
Right.
But was never given the tools to do it because, again, as I think this is a great line from May, how could he teach you to calm your negative emotions? He's the reason you have them. You didn't fail. He did. That's a great perspective to take. Yeah,
absolutely.
So May doesn't, she doesn't wait anymore. She reveals that Sol was the one who killed her mom. Again, we nitpicked about how she probably should have said this to her the first time they had the opportunity to speak. Hey, Sol, who you're chumming with, he killed your mom.
Yeah.
Probably important to note, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy that it hasn't come up yet, but
it does now.
I get it. Why they didn't.
Yeah.
Before
but
now.
This information does, to the show's credit, does totally shake OSHA.
Yeah.
She freaks out. She attacks May. She's like, you assuming she's a liar,
Yeah.
right? We get this hand-to-hand Force Fucon back here.
I like this.
You liked it?
I liked it.
I thought it was fine.
I liked it because of the mirroring that happened a few times where they're like trying to fight each other, but they just can't because they are the same, right? So I did very much like those mirrored movements with the hits and the blocks, and they were
Yeah,
making
because they're
those,
twins and
but-
they're one person, and it's
I
all
thought, like I liked it. I
yeah.
kind of thought it was like a cool.
feels
thing.
like a Cirque du
It's
Soleil.
and it's like a sibling fight too,
Yeah.
in like the perfect sense of like you're not actually trying to hurt each other, or you're not actually trying to kill each other.
Right, you're just trying to like get in a hit here or there. Yeah.
But
And then of course you get this like really cool cut when they like kick each other's legs, and then it cuts to the lightsabers crossed.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
cool.
it was really neat.
I just cute with how she spots Pip. She's like Pip, and then she gets sprayed in the face,
just like he did to
yeah.
May before.
Yes,
Yeah, he's like
yes.
he's
He switched sides, just
I
like
know.
May does. Yeah.
it's upsetting.
Yeah. Well, the black smoke magic makes the sisters on her or her mom seem evil. Yeah, this is kind of Saul's point, which is like
Right, yeah.
they turned into black mist. I mean, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah,
Okay.
scary, spooky,
Yeah.
spooky witch stuff.
Listen, if I saw someone turn into black mist, I would certainly be freaked
Yeah,
out
I'd also probably try and stab him.
if I had a
Get
handy
it? Yeah.
lightsaber. Yeah. We get some choral score here, and I think the music's fine in this sequence. I think in general the music's been very like well above average, and I would say as far as great.
Yeah, this
in this
during
series.
during the show. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Again, we cut to the twins' legs kicking, and then we get to the Saul and Chimer's lightsabers crossed, which is a cool cut. The fight continues as they spot the rest of the Jedi flying in. There's like an opportunity to for a short break. He says, "Now you pay for what you've done." He's assuming that the Jedi are there to back him up. What I love is that Chimer kind of understands the sentiment here is that they can't allow this to stand. So, they're not here for me, which is a great line from like a real dig against Chimer here. Quick cut back to May and Osha, also spotting the Jedi ship. May uses this as a distraction to sneak out. She's learned how to Batman her way from Chimer. And then back with Saul and Chimer, we get some more quick action before the two get locked together. When they finally separate, we get another samurai-esque moment as Saul does a quick strike to cut through Chimer's saber, destroying it and leaving him unarmed. Reminds me very much of the Obi-Wan and Maul death sequence.
Oh yeah, it's like
right,
so
where he just
quick.
does the one move, and then you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
It's happened so fast you don't even
Yeah,
am I cut?
cuts right
Like, what's
through the middle.
happening?
Yeah.
Right, but he cuts his saber,
Yeah.
which is a cool move. Chimer removes the helmet, and I'm not sure why he removes his helmet here, but he does. I guess he's kind of like he's lost, so he's kind of giving up or whatever. He removes his helmet, and the camera pulls back to reveal that Saul has him at saber point. And I think it's a cool visual,
It is.
like the saber right up against his neck, and then as you slowly pan back. But this has got to be the second or third time he's had him at saber point and like let him go.
Just can't do
Yeah.
it.
Can't kill an
Can't kill
unarmed person.
guy. Yeah.
Ring King, Night Sister magic is dark side, but I think Sith really like to kill all Force users. I mean they want to have full control, all that kind of stuff. There was one thing about the black smoke stuff that was that someone reminded me of, or I saw on Twitter. I can't remember where it was, but essentially, we see Night Sisters quote unquote teleport by turning into mist. We see this in some of the Jedi games and that kind of thing. So it's possible that what we were seeing was Mother Anastasia teleporting herself and potentially May away from the scenario, but weren't able to complete the motion.
Yeah, that's what I assumed.
time.
I don't think
Yeah.
she was trying to hurt May when she was doing that.
We just don't the thing is we just don't know what was happening to May, but May was also turning into mist.
Yeah.
Without her permission.
Yeah, fair,
ultimately,
fair.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, before Soul can do anything, he's interrupted by May, who disarms him. Right. This is the first time she's finally been able to get a Jedi's weapon,
Yeah.
but she did it. She had to wait till he was distracted. So whatever. And then we get this classic Sith line from Chimer: "Good May, feel your anger.
Yeah.
This is the source of your pain. Strike him down, and your journey will be complete." You can just hear Palpatine saying that.
Yeah.
Right. Good. Do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, she throws away Saul's saber. Very Jedi coded or Luke coded, right? When he throws away the saber and he won't strike down Vader, right? He hits a rock, and this allows this kind of cracks the emitter on the lightsaber, and we get to see that it reveals the blue kyber crystal inside, right?
Yeah.
Because his lightsaber is blue. She says, no, I want him to confess what he did. I want him to face the High Council, the Senate, the Republic. I want him to pay for his crimes. So it really does feel like May and Osha just did a complete 180, right?
Yeah.
And so she now is taking she's basically saying the exact same lines that Osha was saying about what she wanted for May earlier, right? To face her crimes, to face justice and not revenge.
Yes, exactly.
Right? And it'd be sure be nice to understand why she had that change of heart. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Other than maybe they can't hold the same emotions at the same time for very long until they separate again, because again, they're two sides of the same coin, so they can never occupy really the same emotional space at the same time for very long. That's my bet. That's like my best like headcanon explanation for that, because we again don't get any.
I know. That's
yeah.
why we need a little bit more time.
Yeah. Any thoughts on this?
No, I mean, I like this flip. I like the turn and everything. It's I don't know. It's fun. It's just a fun thing. It's not necessarily what I was expecting from the beginning of the series. So
listen, I think some of the the rhymes, it's like poetry at rhymes moments are on display here.
Yeah.
But I think they need to be a little bit better earned. Throwing away the lightsaber makes sense, but it doesn't necessarily make sense for May to do it, given what she's now she hasn't learned enough new information to trust that the High Council would be able to bring justice at all.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So why would she say that?
Yeah.
And then she later on is like, "Why would you trust the Jedi?" She's like, "You just said that." So whatever.
I do think it's just because she already decided a while ago that she was defecting from Chimera. She was just she's kind of committed to this whole thing of she's like, I'm not doing what you want me to do. I'm not going to kill him for you. Yeah.
Rinking, did we ever get an idea of what Yoda thought about witches? Because he could sense Ventress as an ally to Obi-Wan in the Clone Wars. The sense my assumption is that he knows they're around, isn't really that worried about it.
No, I think Yoda's a very much let it be.
Live and let live type guy. Yeah, 100%.
As long as they're not actively messing
as long as they're not
you.
the Sith specifically, which
Yes.
of course are the Jedi's number one enemy. If you're not with me, you're my enemy.
You're my enemy.
Okay, Saul. I did the right thing. I wanted to protect you both, right? This is his belief. He truly believes he wanted to do the right thing, right? You're not twin. This is okay, so stick with me here. I did the right thing. I wanted to protect you both. Okay, fair enough. Then jumps right to, you're not twins. You and Osha are the same person. I don't know what your mother did, but it had something to do with a virgins on this planet. She created life, your lives. I believe she used the Force to create you and Osha. Do you have any idea what kind of power that is? In the history of the galaxy, very few have been that powerful, right? Chimera's like,
yeah. He's like,
what?
Yeah, you hear him he just clues in on that. He's like, I'm going to go tell my master that real quick.
Right, I've got...
Yeah.
Master, I got news! He trips, dies on a rock.
Yeah.
Can't...
Right.
Cause I guess if there's a vergence on the Force that can be used for that purpose, why wouldn't Plagueis go to this planet?
Absolutely, yeah. He would want to go there and mess with some stuff, for sure.
I mean, maybe they do.
Maybe
it's possible. In fact, I was thinking I was getting those two other the Rocky Island planet confused, but it's possible that they do later go there as a team and try to figure stuff out. But who knows? So I guess what he's saying is I did the right thing because you are so powerful. What they did to create you was such a big deal that I was justified in my actions. That's what he's saying.
It's too dangerous. Yeah.
May pushes him to admit that what he did. So hey, listen, that all might be fine, but you still killed our mom, so admit it.
Yeah.
Right. He takes a moment, but he does admit that he did, in fact, kill Mother Anastasia. He says it, and it's like a weight coming off his chest.
Yeah.
He says yes, and it's I can finally admit that that's what happened. But again, he's not saying I'm a murderer so much. I mean, but he's saying that yes, I did kill her. But again, I'm justified for what happened, given what we know. Osha picking up Saul's saber behind him, hears him say this and asks him if that's true. Quote, I was protecting you. It was the right thing to do. He's really doubling down on that. It was the right thing to do sentiment. And he might not be wrong about that necessarily, right? I think that's what's interesting. What could have been better explored in the Rashomon perspective concept, but was ultimately only a half measure.
Yeah.
If it was the right thing to do, why didn't you tell the Jedi?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Great question.
Great question.
Because you could have.
I'll get right to you on that.
Yeah. You very much could have not avoided all this, but yeah, it's like if you really thought it was the right thing to do, you could have gone to the High Council, explained everything that happened, been like, look, like our hands were tied. I had to. Like there was no way for him to save these girls otherwise, or to do these good things that he was trying to do, right? So, but it's like he obviously knew that it wasn't the right thing to do. Is like kill that girl's, to kill May's mom in front of her.
I think he know. I mean, I think he understands that he made a mistake, but I think the decision that he's ultimately weighing is, if I reveal the total truth, it ruins this girl's life, and I don't want to make that decision. Yeah. And part of that is a selfish choice because he wants to have Osha as his Padawan, but he's also not entirely wrong about saying, if we don't do this, we ruin this. And that's brought up by Indara, right? That wasn't even Soul's thing. He actually did want to admit it.
Right,
the council,
yeah.
Right?
No, exactly.
Ring King here saying, sounds like a bunch of Rey and Kylo stuff that gives me a headache, which, the Force dyad thing is not fully has not fully been explored yet. So there's still time to better understand that whole concept. This isn't that.
No.
I mean, they might be a dyad in the Force, but it's like a artificial one, which is a interesting concept. And it's different from Anakin's immaculate birth, which is also something that we've talked about. Like the Vergence is located, generally speaking, on a location. But in Anakin's case, the Vergence is centered around him.
Right, yeah.
He is the Vergence, which is why he is believed to be the chosen one.
Yes.
Right? So that's interesting, too. Okay, so Soul explains that without May, there wouldn't be proof of the Vergence, and that he couldn't tell her because they would have sent her away and left her and not let her become a Jedi. Felt like he was doing what was best for her. But again, was it what's best for her or what was best for him? A little bit of both, I guess, technically. He continues, vowing that he wanted to tell her sooner, but he couldn't figure out how. He again wanted to give her a life she believed she wanted, right? He's saying, listen, you came to me, you said you wanted to be a Jedi. I wanted to give you that life. If I had revealed this, that wouldn't have happened. That being said, there was opportunities throughout their time together that he could have told her, including when she tried to leave she left the Jedi account.
Yeah.
He could have been honest with her then.
Yeah, or when he could see her struggling, right?
Right. Hey, part of the reason you might be struggling is you don't have all the information.
Yeah.
So, yes, he did fail, right? The failure is on him for being a poor teacher, for being selfish.
Yeah.
Right? But when we empower somebody who, a human who is fallible with, unchecked power, this is what you get. Right? That's the lesson of what the show is trying to say.
Yeah.
I think. Okay. Anyway, he says, I did everything because and he wanted to say I loved you, or I love you. Which is, how do you feel about that? Attachment, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the attachment, but I feel like we do need to see more attachment from the Jedi, but not in a negative way, like not in a way that messes everything up, right?
But we see it with the Padawans, the healthy Jedi Padawan relationships.
Yeah, we do,
right?
Yeah.
But he's saying that, I guess you could argue that the show is basically framing it and saying that they're saying if a Jedi master loves his Padawan, that's a form of attachment that's too far.
It's too far, yeah.
Which doesn't feel right.
No.
Anyway, he starts choking, and you're like, oh shit. Anyway, Osha approaches him, and it's clear that she's force choking him.
Yeah.
She raises her hand, she chokes him further. Stop talking, right? She doesn't want him. She's sick of the lies, right? The music becomes very calm here, which I think is an interesting choice, right? We see the kyber crystal begin to bleed. We cut to a extreme close-up of the kyber crystal. It starts to turn red. This is the first time that this has been seen in live action. or actually I think at all outside of the comics.
Yeah, it's really neat.
And so I think there's some people getting upset about this. This is the first time we've seen it visualized in this way. Here's what you need to know about the bleeding of a kyber crystal, and this is from Wikipedia, from the canon section, right? In the construction of a Sith lightsaber, individuals partook in a process known as bleeding. By ways of the Force, they would pour negative emotions such as rage, hate, fear, and pain into the kyber crystal. The process will result in the crystals gaining a distinctive crimson or red hue. Any kyber crystal can be bled for the use in a Sith lightsaber, though some Sith believe that the proper method to gain a crystal involved capturing one from a Jedi lightsaber. So what we're seeing on screen here is her in the moment as it's happening, pouring her rage, hate, fear, and pain that she was experiencing by being lied to her whole life. The feelings that she talked about already, the negative emotions, the pain from her mother's death, the hate she felt for her sister, redirecting it, it's going into the crystal and bleeding it.
Yeah.
Which is cool because she's doing it unintentionally.
Unintentionally. It's because her skin is also touching the kyber, the exposed kyber crystal. This wouldn't, if that lightsaber was intact, that wouldn't have happened. It's because she's touching it with her hand, and she's actively killing him with all those rage and emotions. That's why this is happening. Because I saw people losing it, just being like, well, then Anakin should have turned on Mustafar. It's no, because he wasn't touching it with his hands. He wasn't actively touching the crystal. And B, there was so much conflict in Anakin for a very long time.
Yeah, he hadn't committed to that concept.
It was just he was experiencing a lot of these emotions, but it's not the same as that pure hatred and rage while you're actively killing another human being. That's an extreme form of emotion that she's feeling there. So to me it makes sense. And it's cool to see. I was I don't know. I was pumped to see it. I'm this is awesome.
Yeah, she's drinking, saying this whole story happens when Yoda went on vacation, and this is what happens when the Jedi Council do stuff on their own. Yeah, if Yoda was directly involved in anything the Jedi did, it would generally turned out better.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. We see he makes his own mistakes, but the Jedi to Master bond is like fathers to a child or parents to a child, and I don't think Yoda would be against that kind of love. We hear Anakin make an argument about the Jedi are supposed to love.
Yeah.
But that use of that example when Anakin's talking about it always feels like he's intentionally twisting the words of the Jedi to his own outcome.
Yes, yeah.
Right? And I think they're right. I think that is what's designed to be, right? A parent and a child. It's really a teacher and a pupil, but often those are conflated anyway. So yes, but I think the idea is that you can't allow that level, that attachment to that, right, to dictate your actions.
Right, yeah.
Right? You have to let the will of the Force play out, yada yada yada, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So he tries to plead for help. Saul does, but she finishes him off. Soul dies at Osha's hands, fulfilling what she saw in her vision. Right? She was the one that kills Saul without a weapon. Right? She falls to her knees, weeping. This is classic dark side turn moment.
Yeah.
What have I done? Yeah. Kymir tries to comfort her, but she draws the saber. I think it's interesting that Kymir is the one to kind of come up to comfort her here, and try to comfort her at all. She draws the saber at him. The blade slowly turns red as she realizes what's happening. It's such a cool visual to watch it slowly turn red.
Yeah.
And it'll be a little bit purplish at the end.
And this is when we see the reflection in her
crackling.
eyes again. You see the same reflection in her eye that you see when the mask comes off.
Very cool.
It's very, very neat.
So I think no notes here. I think I love
great.
this. In terms of hey, a Jedi falling to the dark side. This isn't fully exactly that, but in terms of visualizing the emotional turmoil and how that works with the lightsaber and all that stuff, this is as good as it gets. This is very good stuff.
Awesome.
No problem at all.
Yeah.
Okay. Cut to Venestra and the Jedi as they land. The Jedi finally are here. She reaches out with the Force and senses Kymir. She says, "You!" so that she recognizes him. He puts his helmet back on quickly, but she already knows where they are. and Basil spots Mog as they leave, and they have a nice little reunion. Back with May and Osha, we need to leave. They need to get out of here. Osha reaches out with her hand. Reminds me very much of, again, the episode 8 moment. Come with me, Kylo and Rey stuff. I know a way out, right? So they run off. We get to see Saul's body in the foreground, just not even a concern at this point. Sloan Show, who goes there? Good to see you in the chat, Sloan Show. Yeah. Anyway, the Ring King here. The Sith like to think people cannot change their mind, right?
Yeah.
They are very much, as only the Sith deal in
Absolutes. Yeah.
Right. There's no spectrum of choices. There's just, there is it's do or do not. They have a similar kind of view on that, but it is a much more hardline approach, right? Anyway, the Jedi enter the elevator. May and Osha reach the same pit where they originally got separated. They need to climb down. They get to a core tunnel. We get to see those cool arrow lights. Built that for that 1 5-second shot.
Yeah.
Venestra and the Jedi find Soul's body. She seems to sense what happened here 16 years ago. She's getting Force echoes.
Yeah.
As we get more audio cues from the original events. She has to. She has 2 of the Jedi search the fortress, and the rest set up a 5-click perimeter because they don't like to use distinct distances.
Clicks.
Just clicks. Yeah. Chimera watches from above as Venestra whispers something into the ear of the dead soul. We hear what that is later. Venestra looks up, but Chimera's already gone. Another Batman moment, actually, to be honest. He loves to watch people from
the shadows.
Above in the shadows.
Of course, in the corner.
Yeah. May and Osha continue their escape as the Jedi use Basil to find them. So I guess he's back on Team Jedi again. It's very confusing. Make up your mind, Basil.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's funny that they're all in a group. It's set up a perimeter, but then they're all just standing together.
Right.
Yeah, they're just not the most effective. May and Osha return to the Bunta tree, right, where it all started. May tells Osha about how she waited for her when she was little.
Mm-hmm.
They both apologize, one for not believing the other the other for starting the fire, right? Nice of her to admit that she did start that fire.
I mean, yeah. She's like, yeah, I did.
yeah. Osha breaks down and cries, and May supports her, which is very nice. I think this is supposed to be an emotional sequence. It did not really hit for me.
No.
I don't know if it hit for you.
Not really.
Yeah, the show didn't make me cry, and Star Wars can make me cry pretty
Yeah.
easily, and it didn't work
I came
for me.
close with Jackie.
Oh yeah, poor Jackie.
Yeah.
Anyway, they start to retell their little, rhyme that they have. And they have this little exchange, and I think this is maybe supposed to hint at more. It's like, hey, whoever taught us this? And she's like, I thought you came up with it.
Yeah.
So I guess the sentiment seems to be that their mother probably taught it to them
When they were really little. Yeah.
when they were really little,
Yeah.
about kind of as a nursery rhyme of how they were created.
Yeah.
Right. So Chimera arrives as the Jedi approach. He's like, if I can find you, you so can the Jedi. Osha plans to turn themselves. Again, this is from a character motivation perspective, it's all a big mess.
Yeah.
Osha plans to turn themselves into the Jedi, explain what Saul did, and May and Chimera are like, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Osha, when they find out how powerful you are, you'll meet the same end as our mother,
Mm-hmm.
right? And she's like, good point. She was like, what do we do? And then we get this what do you want moment.
Yeah.
But again, this feels a little unearned because it's never really, it was never a strong character beat for the character that she was constantly being brought along.
Right.
Yes, that was technically happening, but she had a lot of agency through most of her life. Except for key moments. So you can argue that obviously the whole Jedi stuff 16 years ago, her agency was removed at that point, and she was brought into the Jedi stuff kind of against her will to some degree.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
She wanted to be a Jedi, but she didn't understand the context of what was going on, so she didn't have the full picture.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this is a moment where she's like, okay, you finally get to decide. You now have all the information.
Yeah.
Right? The Jedi will use me to find you. I have a big problem with this scene. It's so messy. It feels like there's been reshoots here. They need to inject things to make season 2 work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, why can't they all leave together?
Yeah, I don't know. It's not. I don't
Is
know.
Chimera a killer? Like, is he still gonna kill May? Is that the whole issue, or like?
Or maybe he's worried that Plagueis will kill her. But
yeah.
that's not. None of that stuff is made clear.
I know.
So why does she need to turn herself into the Jedi?
Yeah, it's
That makes no sense
unless
either.
she just has this like guilty conscience and she's like she wants to turn herself in because of the because she killed Indara at the beginning and and Torben, but it's I don't know. I think it's odd.
It strikes me as sometimes when shows need to like wrap a bunch of things up in time for the end of a series, Game of Thrones season 8 style, we end up with shit like this, and it's like what the it's happening too fast. It's hard to understand the motivations, and then ultimately they decide that they need to wipe May's mind. What are we like? First of all, yes, the concept is introduced earlier by Chimera saying, "Don't wipe my mind." Right.
Yeah.
Fun little callback because he could do that the whole time, and it's like, okay, fair enough. But what the fuck are we talking about? Why do we need to wipe May's brain? If they can't be together, just drop her off somewhere else. They'll never find her.
Exactly. I know. I thought that was odd too. And again, this is why we could have used it like an extra episode or two.
Yeah.
But
yeah, because like, ask May or Osha what she wants. Does Osha want May to have her memory erased?
To not remember her and not know her.
It's crazy.
It's odd. Yeah. It's
like
I guess because they're like, oh, we're running out of time. Like it's.
They have to make a decision now.
Leave
then leave together now.
But I guess maybe they need to leave her behind because then they find
like a
someone.
distraction.
Yeah, I guess is kind of what she's saying.
But again, none of this is explained. It's stupid. Anyway, it's a piss off.
Yeah.
I can't lose you again. I'm like, okay, fair. That's believable. You're not. You're going to do what you always were meant to do, and I won't stop you this time. I think this is a nice sentiment. Also, it's like, okay, I admit I was a blocker in you being a Jedi. That played a role in this whole thing. Right. And I will willingly allow you to go off and do this thing. Right. Even though she's going off with Chimera into a death pact that she herself knows, which is a really crazy thing to be like, don't worry, you'll be safe with this guy. No, it's crazy. It's crazy. May has this like a tear running down her cheek, and she reaches out a hand to Chimera. But before they can shake on their deal, Osha turns back and gives May a big hug. I will say it's cool to be like, hey, you weren't able to fulfill your destiny of becoming a Jedi, but I can train you in the ways of the Force. And then flipping that over to the Chimera thing. I think that's cool. Fair enough. Anyway, I'll find you. I know you will. Okay, so if you're going to erase her memory, what does that like mean to like bring her back? Can you fix it later? Because he says permanently earlier. So what the fuck? Again, massive problems with this scene.
But maybe because they're like they're not twins. They are the same person, so maybe they can fix it with her own brain somehow.
Rinking says, send May to Tatooine. No one will care who she is.
True.
Everyone knows Tatooine's a great place to hang out and hide out, right? Wild. Anyway, I don't think this is a reflection of the entire series, but I think this is a reflection of the mistake of making this an 8-episode series instead of longer or something longer. Anyway, they finish their rhyme, and I think it's a nice note to have it like Chimera erase her mind as they're doing it. And she's not able to finish. I think that's like a cool way to show and tell what's going on, right? Anyway, the Jedi arrive at the Bunta tree, but they find May. No one else. They arrest her, and she's like, "What did I do?" Right. Okay. They were like, they probably weren't expecting that. Cut to Coruscant. Any other final thoughts on that?
No. I agree that it's could have used
very
more
messy.
time,
Yeah. Cut to Coruscant. The Jedi take May into custody. She's brought before Venestra, who's in a very cool Jedi robe. I guess these are kind of like the High Council robes at this time. No notes on her outfit here. Very
beautiful.
Badass. Yeah. Her restraints are removed and is invited to sit. Quote, they say I killed someone, but I don't remember. May, right? Interesting question. If you murder somebody and then have amnesia, are you still guilty of the crime?
Yes.
That sucks then.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks. But just because you don't remember it,
right.
It's
But they seem to be cool with it. Like, she's like, okay, if you don't remember, then it's like, that's cool then. Because
I guess because the motivation isn't there.
She also, I think she understands that she was manipulated and that there was events that were outside of her control to some degree. But like, their ability this entire show's ability to forgive people murdering people is wild.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, except for in certain obvious circumstances, like when Osha kills Saul. Anyway, all she remembers apparently was the events of her mother's death and the fire at the fortress. Her memories are from 16 years ago, which is crazy. It sounded like she was just erasing the memories of Kymir and Osha, but like
everything.
That's a lot of stuff to erase. 16 years? She's basically an 8-year-old again, or whatever, right? She knows there's someone she needs to find, but she's not who she is or sure who she is. Vanessa reveals that Sol was the one who killed her mom. Right? Listen, I had this friend of mine. He says he was a kind and brilliant, and compassionate man, and he did a terrible thing. Again, another kind of like larger look at the series as a whole, which is that the Jedi are supposed to be kind and compassionate, and that even they can make mistakes. Right. But I think her line reading here is actually
it's very good.
Right. This is the closest I came to having a feeling anything in this episode. That's not true. I did feel something here. I think it was well executed in this moment. We get this weird cross-cutting though. So we cut to Venestra doing a report to the Senate tribunal that was mentioned earlier. We get our first glimpse at Chancellor Drellick as Venestra reports on what happened. By the way, Chancellor Drellick, same species as the Chancellor of the New Republic when they get blown up by the Starkiller base in episode 7. Yeah. When they look up and they're like, "Oh no, what have we done?" And they explode. Yeah. Anyway, Venestra essentially blames Saul for everything, saying he killed his fellow Jedi in an attempt to maintain the cover-up. They discovered a force cult of witches. A conflict ensued. There were many casualties. So I guess this is the cover-up. A conflict ensued, and there was many casualties. Yeah. And that Saul felt like he needed to kill more Jedi to cover up this.
To cover that up, and yeah.
It's a little thin, a little flimsy.
Yeah.
So you can understand why the Senate might be like, a little skeptical, right? Anyway, the Jedi conspired to keep their actions secret, right? We see Osha, and that actually is true. They did conspire to keep their actions secret.
Yeah.
Right. We see that Osha whispered, "I'm sorry, my friend," as she knew she was going to like throw his memory under the bus.
Yeah.
Right? Real rough. This really great Jedi makes a mistake, and then his entire memory is just basically and legacy is erased.
Yeah.
In an attempt to prop up the Jedi in a political system.
Yeah.
Problematic.
Yeah.
Right? Any thoughts on that?
No, it's just it's gross. It's unfortunate that that's the way she felt things needed to go, and it's all because of politics, and that's kind of always been the Jedi's falling point, is dealing with the Senate and the politics of the Senate and all that. It's always been an issue. So
right.
Yeah.
Ring King here. Only if the Jedi Council had told Anakin, "Yes, we know you have a wife," and had the Jedi been okay with that, Anakin would have never turned. But the thing is, the Jedi would have never been okay with that. Not the Jedi at that time, especially Mace Windu. Oof,
yeah.
Real stickler for the rules, that guy. So, yeah, I mean, I guess this is ultimately what it comes down to. If the Jedi in general were more open to traditional relationships and traditional attachment, they would probably have less issues, but it would also open themselves up to more issues.
Yes, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because it would have more people making selfish decisions.
Yes, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So speaking on behalf of the High Council, she's on the High Council at this point, correct?
I don't know.
Venestra? I think she is. Speaking on behalf of the High Council, we wholly condemn the actions of Master Sol. Sounds like a press release.
Right, yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. We solely condemn the actions of this one police officer, does not represent the actions of the department, yada, yada, yada. Senator Ravenclaw uses his information to call for an immediate external review of the Jedi. Quote, "I can assure you," this is from Venestra, "while this was a terrible tragedy, it was the work of one flawed man." Again, very PR written. Senator Ravencourt really comes out looking very much accurate for his desire to have an independent review. We see a shot of Venestra giving Sol a Jedi funeral pyre on Brendock in the middle of a lake, as we hear her tell the Chancellor that she believes he ended his own life. I actually thought this very cool visual shot on location, beautiful.
Yeah, it was.
Again, a better show would have shown us her doing this
Yes.
and her grappling with her emotions of that at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead, this is all done as a part of a montage, essentially. As she basically insinuates that he killed himself when that's not at all what happened.
Yeah.
We cut back to Vanestra talking to May. So cross-cutting again. Sol made a mistake he lived with for so long, it twisted his mind. He justified every selfish step with the love he had for your sister. Entirely accurate.
Yeah.
No notes, actually.
No notes. Yeah.
And then, Ring King's here. Vanestra sent Sol on this mission. Yes, but she didn't understand the full context of what was going on with the witches and all that stuff, so she couldn't have known what he was sending him into.
Yeah.
Right? You say, I still think that he knew he was with Padme. I mean, maybe.
Oh, well, like
But-
Obi-Wan knew.
Obi-Wan knew, but I don't. Thing is, though, the Jedi at that time, so high in their own supply, they couldn't really imagine Jedi doing things like that, so I don't think Mace knew.
No.
Because if Mace knew, he would have kicked him off the council and all that other stuff, right? So, no. Yeah. He would have just sent him to the dark side way sooner, ultimately. Yeah. It's so unfair. Anyway, I love this line. I think it's just a shame we just never really got any great lines like this from Vanestra in the rest of the whole series, right? Her talking about Sol as a compassionate person, and here talking about how the mistakes he made twisted his mind and selfish steps. Like, these are all accurate and like coming from a place of love for her friend, right? May is surprised to learn she has a sister. Oh, she's like, oh, I had a sister? That was the person that I was trying to find? Okay. Does the name Osha mean anything? Oh, no? Okay. You poor girl, you've been through so much. The Jedi has failed. The Jedi have failed you. I'm going to make this right, but I need your help. I need you to help me find someone, a pupil of mine, before he turned to evil.
Yeah.
So what does she mean by make this right?
I mean, yeah, I think Vanestra obviously knows that her mind's been wiped, so I think she means like to make everything right. Like, it's get her mind back, and yeah, and I think she's also blaming a lot of this on Chimere. Like, I think Vanestra's like, this is my wayward student that has gone off and like recruited these two Acolyte girls, right? All this mess has happened kind of because of Chimere a little bit. At least the aftermath, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think she's probably feeling a little guilty about that because it's her former Padawan. So I think she's probably like, God.
If I hadn't failed this Padawan, Sol wouldn't have had to do this thing, and it's like it all comes back to her original mistake.
Yeah. So it's like we got to make this right. Like we got.
So she's,
but it's on Chimere now.
So she's basically saying, listen, I know you killed those Jedi, but ultimately it was my fault.
Yeah.
You don't remember anymore, so I'm not going to hold you
responsible.
To this, really.
Yeah, but we have to find.
But you need to help me
find this guy.
Find a pupil of mine before he turned to evil.
Yeah.
Which of course is obviously again a reference to A New Hope and Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Okay, so we get two final scenes here. Ranking. Yoda hooked up with Padme. Yoda hooked Padme up with Anakin on purpose because I bet Yoda has lots of Grogus all over. Hilarious. But if it's true that Grogu is Yoda's son, which is not necessarily...
I think that'd be wild. But,
it would be,
yeah.
But I will say that the Jedi have made exceptions for certain species in the past.
Ki-Adi-Mundi is allowed.
Right, for Ki-Adi-Mundi. Because their species... I don't know, don't have a lot of kids or something.
It has something
it's
to do
unclear.
with males. Their species doesn't produce a lot of males, and there weren't a lot, so their species was dying out.
Right. So there's like you're allowed. So they'll make certain exceptions. So if that was true, then there might be a reason for it.
Yeah.
Okay. So cut back to the unknown planet. Osha. This is where Plagueis is, but they're just chilling here. Ocean Chimere at sunset. Look out over the ocean. As the music adds, a little bit more strings, we kind of like bring that dark side energy back in here. They hold hands, and they kind of like hold their lightsaber together. It's very cute. And then the music ramps up into a crescendo. Cut to black.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
I liked it. I was like,
fine.
oh, okay.
Yep,
yeah,
okay.
Look at that.
Which interesting. Would be like, sure, nice to see more of this.
Yeah.
Right. With maybe some lessons learned to kind of maybe tweak things a bit.
Yeah.
Cut to black. We get the stinger here. Coruscant, Vanestra Rho enters a room in the Jedi Temple. Sorry to disturb you, Master. We need to talk. The camera pulls back, and we see the back of Yoda's head. He's a little puppet. He's not the CG version. Cut to credits. Why do they feel like we talked about do you think we're going to get a Yoda cameo? We did ultimately
Kind of,
at the very end, but was it worth it?
Not really.
Was it worth the price?
No. I don't think I don't know. I feel like we didn't really need that Yoda cameo, to be completely honest. But I don't know. It's just like it's so hard to know when we don't know the fate of the rest of the story. So I think that's just
I would be interesting a season 2 with Yoda directly involved trying to solve this situation.
I feel like if anything,
is interesting.
she's just gonna tell him like, I have a wayward student on the loose. Like I need to tell you, and we need to find him. I don't think she's gonna tell him it's Sith though.
Well, we learn about Yoda learns about the rule of 2 somehow, right?
Yeah.
So at some point
they always knew about the rule of 2 though, just because Sith and Jedi have been like at each other.
Yeah,
for,
but that information might be lost over time. I mean, all I'm saying is that there's options there, given what we know that Yoda already knew coming into Episode 1. Always 2 there are, right? So, which he says to Mace Windu, which feels like something he's telling Mace Windu for the first time.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's fair.
So, yeah, again, I could see that as an option, or it's just like a fun wink and a nod to, hey, Yoda was here the whole time.
Yeah.
In which case, then it feels particularly useless. But this cameo, like the Plagueis cameo, connects it to the larger world, but does not connect it to the plot, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
So. Cut to credits, and then we get a pretty crappy song.
Bad.
Way worse than the one that we got.
The other one was fine. This one sounded like, I said, something like straight out of Harry Potter. It was not good. I'm sorry to whoever created it and made it. It doesn't fit with the universe.
Strike in. They add the power of one,
and,
power of two, power of many into the
It sounded
Star
like a
Wars-y
made-up
stuff.
Star Wars witch song. Or made-up Harry Potter witch song.
Wait, so this one or the previous one?
This one.
This one.
This one.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Not the R&B
No.
one.
The R&B one was fine. I like that.
Yeah,
was fine.
that's cool. This one feels like a half step between those two,
it's
and
weird.
doesn't strike. It's neither
Didn't like it.
orchestral in traditional orchestral, or neither
Yeah.
modern music. So it's like, or as they call it in Star Wars, jizz.
Cantina music. For
That's
those
cantina
who
music. Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. I think it's just a version of jazz. It's not all music is jizz. Just to be clear.
No.
It's still hilarious. It's still hilarious.
It's too late for this.
Listen, I agree. Okay, let's wrap it up. Any final thoughts on this episode and the season as a whole?
No, I mean, I just kind of want to reiterate. It's just hard to know where we're going from this. So it would just be nice if we kind of knew. But I guess if we're gonna get some more story, if we're not gonna get more story,
I would like more.
I would.
That's my stance
I
on
would
this.
too.
I want a season 2.
Yeah, I would like
lessons
it
learned.
because it'd be really, really cool to see some actual Plagueis stuff. He probably murders these two at some point.
Oh yeah, almost certainly.
So
yeah.
it's like there's some really cool Sith stuff, and it would be a cool fully Sith story,
right?
with
You
maybe
could,
just a sprinkling of Jedi stuff,
right?
And that's what I would like to see. So
right.
Yeah.
And maybe we get some more sense of what are some of the elements that Plagueis put into place.
Yeah, it'd be cool
around their master plan.
Yeah.
Right? This is obviously well before they're ordering
exactly.
the Kaminoans to build to
yes,
manufacture
this is way before,
clones and stuff like that. But not that far removed,
Yeah.
because again, they needed to start working on those clones decades before, so that they had an army in place already.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that my understanding is that Plagueis instructed Palpatine to have that happen, and then he used Dooku, I think, to influence. It's like a long, weird chain of events, but then you also get what's his name, Sifo Dyas, who is Sith crazy, or sorry, Jedi crazy or Force crazy. He gets he has Force schizophrenia.
Yeah.
And then he's ultimately used to manipulated by the Sith to create the army that ultimately takes the Jedi down. But there are motions put in place by Plagueis to funnel money to the Kaminoans and all this other stuff to make that happen.
Yeah, that, and I just it's just neat to maybe see him try to manipulate the Force a little bit, because that's coming to some of the theories,
to extend his life and
Yeah.
all that stuff. And it's obviously it seems like he has those fingers that the clone Palpatine has, and then his fingers come back in A Rise of Skywalker, a shitty movie, but cool moment. And so there's maybe he's been using the midichlorians to sustain his own life, but it's still rotting him to some degree.
But I would I would like to see way more Sith story. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we are all in agreement on that. Anyway, thank you, Rain King, and everyone else who joined us in the chat today. We'll be back with more Star Wars with whatever the next series is, which, again, my understanding is it's Skeleton Crew, which looks cool as hell. So hopefully we might get a trailer for that relatively soon.
Yeah.
Maybe at Comic-Con would be a cool place to do that. Freaking, you would think the Jedi have an intelligence test because the show has a lot of dumb Jedi. There's a lot of dumb Jedi in general. That's the test is are they good with the Force? Not if they're intelligent, unfortunately, right? As we learned from Episode 1, the ability to speak does not make one intelligent.
Yes.
Anyway, we'll be back to cover Skeleton Crew. Hopefully, if between now and then is a very long time, we'll try to schedule some sort of like little catch-up session for Star Wars-related stuff if I come up with a good idea. But until then, follow the main show. There's lots of other nerdy shit to talk about, including Star Wars news that might pop up over time. As I said, the Tower Babble podcast is the main feed. We'll be covering Wolverine and Deadpool and Twisters and a whole bunch of other stuff over the next few weeks. But it is summer, so the episodes will be spaced out a little bit over probably the next month or so, especially as my job search continues. As this may surprise you, does not sustain my full income.
No, not yet.
Not yet. But hey, maybe we get there one day.
We're gonna keep it positive.
Yeah, maybe we get there one day. Patreon.com/TowerBabbleCast, Facebook.com/TowerBabbleCast, and Twitter, same thing, same handle on all those things. And again, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and Twitch to find when we go live. But until then, we look forward to the Acolyte Season 2, Skeleton Crew, and many more Star Wars. May the Force be with you.